did I meet my wife of over 20 years? How'd she become a believer in Jesus Christ? How has her faith been impacted by her belief in Calvinism? And how have her beliefs helped her get through our recent discovery that she has brain cancer? These are the kinds of questions that we'll discuss in today's episode of Theopologetics. Hi, this is Chris Date, and welcome to Theopologetics, where every other week I discuss a wide variety of theological issues and show how a properly biblical worldview can help defend the historic Christian faith from its critics. Join me as we think through what we believe and why we believe it, and not something else. Well, hello again. Welcome to another episode of Theopologetics. I am Chris Date, and I was supposed to go live 2 weeks ago to continue my series reviewing a certain portion of Sam Storms' book, The Language of Heaven, in preparation for a debate/discussion that I'm going to be having with him on the nature of the spiritual gift of tongues. But for reasons that you'll hear about in today's pre-recorded interview, I wasn't able to stream that evening, and rather than continue that series now, I thought that I would share a more important, more relevant story with you of sorts. Before I get into that pre-recorded interview, just did want to share a couple of things. First of all, here is the Capturing Christianity YouTube channel by now Roman Catholic Cameron Bertuzzi, and it's on his channel that I'll be debating/discussing the nature of tongues with Sam Storms. If you scroll down right from his channel page, you'll see it right here, debating the nature of tongues in the Bible. It's going to air, or we're going to go live on Thursday, December 15th at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. You can see here live in 9 days. So I hope that you'll tune into that. If you've been following my series and some of the other videos I've done or interviews I've done on the topic of tongues, you'll know that this is something that I've started to get pretty interested in. I have the utmost of respect for Dr. Storms, and I'm very much looking forward to the discussion. That was one announcement. The other announcement is that in March 17th through the 19th of next year, 2023, in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, not Washington, I'm going to be speaking at Kurt Jaros's The Defenders Conference. They're calling it a hell of a conference this year, playing on the word hell, obviously. And Kurt has gathered scholars representing each of the three major views of hell and a view that really has nothing at all to do with hell, namely purgatory. I know who the eternal torment speaker is. That's going to be Sean Bawalski. He's one of the traditionalist contributors to the book I'm currently co-editing with Paul Copan. I don't know who he's going to have speak on purgatory, but my guess is Jerry Walls from Houston Baptist University. And I don't know who he got to represent universalism, but it'll be interesting to see who that proves to be. But anyway, I'm really looking forward to sharing more details about this as they are made known. For now, this is the only information I have to offer. Again, March 17th through the 19th, Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. If you follow, or if you look up the Defenders Conference and Kurt Jaros, you should be able to keep an eye on it. But I'll be certainly sharing it around on my social media and stuff like that once more details are available. So anyway, with all of those, with those two announcements out of the way, let me just sort of prime you for the interview, the pre-recorded interview that you're about to watch. My wife and I were actually going to do this live right now, but we ended up having to take her to start her inpatient treatment at the hospital today. In fact, I got back home from dropping her off just about 20 minutes ago, so I'm glad I got here in time to start the show. I'll leave most of it for the interview that I'm about to play, but suffice to say that 2 weeks ago today, I took my wife in the morning to the local emergency room at Good Samaritan Hospital in Puyallup for some reasons that you're going to be hearing about in the course of this interview. And we discovered there that evening, after an MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, I think is what that stands for, an MRI of her head that revealed that she has a sizable brain tumor. And over the days that followed, there was a bit of a whirlwind as we learned more and more about what was going on. And we're going to talk all about that in the interview that you're about to watch. We recorded it 2 days ago, Saturday, since we learned that Starr wouldn't be here tonight to do the live show. And it's a bit of a long one, so come back, pause it part of the way through and come back and watch the rest later if you like. I'd love for you to stick around for the whole thing. But basically, we spend about the first 45 minutes or so just getting to know her and talking about her faith background, her testimony after we got married and how we got met and eventually got married, and the role that Christianity has played in her life since then. And then after that first 45 minutes or so, we then transition into talking about how we discovered that she has a brain tumor and what that whole process has looked like and what the future outlook is, her prognosis, stuff like that. So I guess I don't really have much else to say other than that I will be in the chat interacting as needed. I will probably step away here and there to provide dinner for my family since my wife's in the hospital. But I will be available in the chat if you have questions or anything, possibly, although doubtfully. My wife might even hop into the chat from her hospital room in Seattle. But don't assume that she will be there. I will be, though, so feel free to ask me any questions you might have. And without further ado, I'll go ahead and shift over to my pre-recorded interview with my wonderful, amazing, beautiful bride, Starr. Here we go. Well, I'm joined today by my better half, my wife, Starr. Starr, thanks for the best half. That's true. And we were going to do this live at the time that you guys are watching, but unfortunately, or fortunately, depending upon how you look at it, it turns out my wife's first hospital stay will begin on Monday, so she won't be able to do this live. So thank you for your willingness to record.
Just know that I will probably not be watching this live. It's on because I don't know if I'll ever watch this again. We'll see.
No, I understand. Just in case there's any people out there that think like I pressured you into this or that I'm taking advantage. I mean, this was. No. I think you suggested maybe coming on the show and talking about it.
We've been talking for a long time about doing a show of some sort together, even just to introduce a little bit more of Chris, because I think it's important that so many people care about you and appreciate you, and I don't know if you share enough of who you truly are as a person. The way I know you, and I want everybody to know you the way I know you because you're amazing.
Maybe not every way you know me, but
won't go there. But so we've been talking about doing something like this, whether it be marriage and how we've navigated our life together through our faith and things like that. And this, I was always just too shy to do it and came up with excuses. And then this whole thing came up, and it was well, I guess here's an opportunity. So, Chris took a break for a while over the summer and then came back, and then all of a sudden, he's going to take another break. Let's let everybody on why, if you haven't been following us. And, before it was I have to have my makeup done. I have to make sure I'm okay. But at this point, I don't care. I'm in a dirty shirt. I don't care. Anybody who didn't know me before this, who has now found out about our story, my introduction to you probably the past couple weeks has been from a hospital bed in a lovely hospital gown. So this isn't me. I don't care anymore. So here we are.
All right. Well, I figure we'll start spending a little bit of time getting to know you and us as a couple, and then we'll dive into more recent events. So one of the things I ask pretty much all my guests, with few exceptions, is for their faith background. And I obviously know some of this about you, given that we've been married for over 20 years. But talk a little bit for a minute about what, if anything, what role, if at all, faith played in your family life growing up.
None at all, really. My grandma's always been, praying and loving God and, doing good and everything. She's mostly, her and my grandfather were a good direction for me on how to just be a good person, whatever that meant. Just be the best you can be. But as far as faith and religion, I think I went to church maybe once with a friend when I was really little, just because I wanted to see what it was like. And my sister would go to church camp with her friends, but that didn't really mean anything. She just wanted something to do in the summer. But no, there was never any religion. Both my parents, I believe, I don't even know fully, and this is just kind of my story that I always say, but I'm pretty sure they were both baptized, but that was more just, what you did back then.
Cultural
cultural family. My mom's family is, half of her family is Mexican, and Catholicism was a big deal, and they didn't go to church, they didn't practice. Like I said, my dad's family, they didn't go to church or anything. And so it was just never there. And then I, grew up, and you hit junior high and you kind of get into the swing where you decide what you're going to do. And I said, there's no such thing as God. And my grandma would say, Starr Michelle, yes, there is. Don't say that. You believe in God. You believe in God. And I'm like, okay, sure. But it was just never something that was there for me. It was, my parents always said, we are going to let you make your own decisions, which that's fine. You have to let people make their own decisions in their life and follow their own path, wherever God may lead them. But I also feel like you need to provide some options, and I don't think that was ever provided to me. I don't blame my parents at all. Things happen the way they happen. That's what I believe. God's already written it out, so it happened exactly the way it was going to happen. But it wasn't something that was ever in my life at all.
Yeah.
And then as you get older, you kind of reject it even more, but we can get into it.
Sure. Well, and the conversion from atheism to Christianity for both of us is something that happened after we got married. So before we get to that, why don't we talk a little bit about how you and I met in high school and eventually, not immediately, but eventually started dating and stuff. Talk about that.
Well, we met through a mutual friend on my brain's a little, tumor. So my brain's a little spotty, so just bear with me here. Chris will edit out the rambling.
Or just leave it in for fun.
Oh, great. So we were introduced on August 2nd, 1997. We have a mutual friend whose name is Philip. He is the start of our story. We had both been friends with him since junior high. I think like 7th or 8th grade is when I met Philip. And it was so bizarre because we didn't even go to the same schools. We were both in orchestra, and we were on a joint orchestra trip to, sister junior highs. And this kid was across from me on the bus, not Chris, but Philip. And he had really cool headphones. Philip had cool stuff. He was this only child growing up. He got all the cool stuff. But he had like a Discman, which at the time in 8th grade was like, whoa, where'd he get that?
I remember, it's funny you mentioned that because I remember how he and I got to know each other. We were both in some kind of computer class. Everybody had a computer. And at the time, I didn't listen to any music, any popular music or anything. The only CD I owned was the Jurassic Park soundtrack. I was a super nerd. Still am, of course. But Philip sat either in front of me or behind me, and I remember one day, I don't know if we had gotten to know each other yet, but one day he said, hey, do you want to give this a shot? And he gave me a Radiohead CD, Pablo Honey, their first album.
So I've known Philip longer than you have then.
Well, this would have been 8th or 9th grade. No, it was junior high because it was at Matson. We went to Matson Junior High, and you went to
Sequoia.
Yeah. So anyway, it's just funny how we both perceived him as being kind of cool.
He's the cool kid. He's got the Discman.
So and he was.
He was. And so this kid who, I think I talked to him throughout that day. We went to Vancouver in Canada for the day for a conference or something, or a music conference. And I think I said maybe 3 sentences to him. And on the way back down to Seattle, I just looked at him. I said, that's a cool Discman. Can I listen to that? And he goes, sure. I'm like, okay. And then the next year, or it might have been the year later when we went to the same high school, I was like, hey, you're the kid with the Discman. And we just became friends. And so Philip, cut to August of 1997, he was going to take me to a concert in Seattle with another friend of mine.
Was this Pain in the Grass?
It was Pain in the Grass, back when that was free, for anybody who knows what that is. Now it's a very expensive festival, at the Seattle Center. And he was going to see his favorite band, Goodness. And he'd played me their music before, and he said, hey, I'm going to pick up my friend tomorrow. He was going to pick my friend Laura and I up. We were going to go to, actually I have a picture we can insert here, the day we met.
Noted.
And he said, "Is it okay if we bring my friend Chris?" And I said, "Sure." And then I said, "Chris who, though?" Because I didn't know who he was talking about. And he said, "Chris Date." So I immediately got off the phone with him. I was at my friend Laura's house. I said, "Get the yearbook. I want to see this guy, see if he's cute."
And he wasn't.
Oh, and I would look up his name, and I go, "Chris Date." And I opened up, and we went, "Oh, okay."
That's great.
But when we went and picked Chris up the next day, I swear I walked in, we went to pick him up, and I was like, "Oh, he does not look like his picture. He is cute." I remember what he was wearing. A Goodness shirt. You're wearing the red or the black shirt with said Goodness on it. And I immediately became just smitten.
This was at the Alano Club I worked at, right?
Yeah.
In Auburn?
When it was the juice bar or whatever. Yep. I couldn't believe it. I was like, he is adorable. And I just became obsessed.
But we didn't start dating very soon.
We didn't start
did we?
dating. No, we did not date at all because
I was a jerk.
Well, and it was a time in Chris's life where he was transitioning from being a band geek, and he was playing in a cool ska band at the time, and he wanted to, open up his world a little bit to a little bit harsher of a crowd. He wanted to get away from the band and orchestra nerds a little bit. And so I just... I had never, because Chris is always, he's smart. He's the smartest person I know. And I'm average.
Yeah, I think you're above average.
I'm average. I have my moments every once in a while. But I'd never seen him in school before. I couldn't believe that we went to school together for at least 3 years, and I'd never even seen him, even though he was in band and I was in orchestra. We played in the symphonic band together, and I just never paid attention. And then on the first day of school, I didn't think I was ever going to see him again because he's in AP classes and I'm in the just getting by so I can barely graduate classes. And he walked into my business law class and I was so excited. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, it's Chris!" And so he came over and sat in my row and we became friends. And then we realized that we had other mutual friends that we didn't even realize.
Like who?
Matt,
yeah.
Brianna, Pam, all the smart people that were in his AP classes were in my chamber orchestra and symphonic orchestra classes and stuff. And I just didn't know our paths never crossed. And so then I started noticing him everywhere and we just kind of became friends. And then Sadie Hawkins came a month later and I asked him to go to the dance with me and just as friends. And he's like, "Well, yeah, I like somebody else." And I'm like, "Okay, we'll just be friends." And it was just a lot of me reaching out for a long time. Over the rest of the school year, pretty much. But by that time, he had started running with a whole other crowd, and it spiraled out of control. I barely saw him at all. And then the end of the school year came, and I remember on the last day of school that I was going to see him, I was so bummed out because I'm like, I'm never going to see him again. At this point, he was getting ready to move into his own apartment and hanging out with totally different people. And I remembered, I have pictures for this too, last day of school. And I said, "Chris, isn't it so sad? We're not going to see each other. We're not going to be here at school." And he said, "No." And I was like, "Oh, okay, well, fine."
I was a different person, just to be clear. That is not how I am now.
So we separated for the summer. I didn't see him again. And then Philip and I, we became really close that summer, really good friends, because Philip was getting ready to leave for school. He was going to college, and I was staying. I didn't have any prospects. I was still living at home. I was just 18. And so Philip and I just were hanging out, and then he went to school. And then at the end of that summer, I ran into Chris at a festival in Seattle. And I was like, "Hey, how have you been doing?" And he had a piercing, and he just looked totally different. And it was shocking.
I might have had 2 piercings by then, the eyebrow and the septum.
I think you might have. And so it was like, "Hey, let's get connected with each other." And then Philip came. I'm going through this really quick, but and then Philip came back in the winter. So I mean, it was 1999. It was right after we graduated high school. Philip came back for winter break, and he said, "Hey, you and Chris and I should get together." And I said, "Oh, I've bumped into Chris a couple times. That would be cool to hang out." And Chris knew senior year that I liked him. I told him. He was clear that I had a crush on him, but he made it very clear that he was into different girls, not me.
I'm really sorry.
Baby, please, I got you now. It doesn't matter. But it was very clear that he had no interest in me. But I had to hear about these other girls. One in particular, who I will not mention, but I'm sure she knows who she is out there. No, that's not animosity. That's not bad. I love her. She's actually, I'm closer with her than Chris is now. She's amazing. Beautiful woman. Beautiful artist woman. I love her anyway. We made like a triple date that we were going to get together and hang out, just Philip and Chris and myself. And so we got together, and Chris had a bad night because he felt once again, like this girl was rejecting him, and he was just so bummed out. And it was making me mad because I'm like, Philip is here hanging out with us, and he's complaining about so-and-so. But then it really started to make me mad because I was listening to him complain about girls never like me. No one wants to be with me. Wah, wah, wah. And I was so frustrated. I said, you know what? You are so dumb. I had the biggest crush on you, and you would never even look my way. I don't want to listen to it anymore. And then it's like something clicked. And the conversation went quiet. I feel bad. Sorry, Philip. It got really awkward. But the next day, Chris called me, and he's like, hey, do you want to go out tonight? And I was like, oh my gosh, are you serious? And we started dating the next day. And that was January 20, I don't remember the exact date. It was like the beginning of January of 1999, I think. And he has not gotten rid of me since then.
Not for lack of trying. No,
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
Well,
I'm kidding.
just kidding.
Well, and so fast forward then, by the time we got married, which was in May of 2000, we were both pretty ardent atheists. And I have my brief, fleeting memories of the role that played in our relationship. But what's your recollection of how we mutually felt? Do we even talk about it much?
About our religion?
About or lack
about
thereof?
God?
Yeah.
No, it wasn't really anything we ever talked about because by that point, I had made a decision that there was no such thing as God. And, I was just worried about getting out of my parents' house, and that's when you could do that back in the early 2000s. You could.
It's a lot harder now. That's
back in 1999. I mean, yeah, it was just like, I need to get out of here. So Chris and I, like I said, we started dating like officially in January, and then we had actually moved in together. His mother was getting married, and so she was moving out of her place, and she offered to let us take it over for her. And I was having problems at home, and I needed to get out. And I had just started working my first full-time job. I mean, I went from like graduation to working full-time. And so we ended up just saying, hey, let's take over this rental. And we moved in together August of 1999. And by the beginning of September, we were engaged. And we weren't even thinking about religion. He had tried out different things and was interested in different things, but I had no interest whatsoever. And I remember when we told our family we're getting married, it was not comfortable because, you got these young kids. I think now we have a 21 and a half year old. And I think if he at 19 years old came to me and said, we're getting married in the spring, I would say, that's hilarious. Yeah. Get out of my house. That's not happening.
Nobody thought there was a chance we'd last. And they had every reason to think we wouldn't.
We fought all the time. Like we would pick fights. We were just not in a good place. But I think that we both wanted so hard, just from our different family backgrounds, to have a family. We wanted to be married. And so even though we shouldn't have we didn't even really get engaged. I remember we were driving to my house, and I'm like, married? I said, do you like being in this relationship? Yeah. Well, I mean, we're going to get married someday, because, you say, oh, well, wait till we're 30. And I'm like, well, why aren't we just getting married then? I was like, okay, why not? Right. And then so we waited a week because it was my brother's birthday. I'm like, let's wait 1 week. And then we'll tell him. And so the next week was my sister's birthday. And I said, we just moved in together. We're getting married next May. And my dad looked at me and said, May is a long way away, and walked out of the room. And I was heartbroken. But I mean, again, you're 20 years old. No, 19. I was 19 years old. Yeah. And our friends thought we were crazy. Our friends were surprised that we had been even dating the few months that we were able to hold on, because it was just, you're children. You have no life experience, no idea. But we just stuck with it, and we're like, no, you know what? Because we're both very stubborn. And we're like, no, we're going to prove to them that it's going to work. And so, but one of the things that we were positive about is when we get married, it will be a judge. There will be, the word God will not be uttered in our ceremony. Not once. It will be
adamant about that.
None. No religion. This is a civil ceremony, so we can legally be married. That's it. And that was our focus. Yeah.
I've been telling people And I'm wondering, I want to make sure, because I've got a bad long-term memory.
Yeah.
But
you have bad short-term memory too.
Well, that's true too. But like, there are a few things that happened at that wedding that particularly stand out, having to do with having gotten a justice of the peace.
Oh, it was a mess.
So the guy, if I remember correctly, showed up drunk.
Yeah.
Forgot to have us read our vows.
A City of Seattle, King County Court Superior Judge, who was a friend of a friend and did us a favor, showed up drunk on a Saturday.
To be honest, I could understand, though. He's showing up to marry two kids that he has every reason to think are going to break up within no time.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he forgot to have us read our vows to each other. We ended up reading those to each other later that night.
In the car on the way to Sherry's after the wedding.
And then the third thing, this is the thing I doubt my memory the most about. I seem to recall he didn't have us kiss each other, and your Uncle Mickey called from the audience, "Hey, kiss her already."
Yeah.
Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, like he said, "You're married," and then just kind of stood there, and we're like,
"Okay,
okay, thank you, sir. Here's our $150." Yeah. So we were walking away, and my uncle's like, "Kiss her!" And then everybody cheered, and I have a picture you can insert here of us crying all over each other. And Philip was a big part of our wedding that day. He spoke over us. I have a picture. He spoke at our wedding, and it was just it. I'll bring Philip up later, but he is the catalyst. I mean, God is the catalyst, or whatever you want to call it. But Philip really is the glue that brought us together, and more on that.
Well, it's just great that he gets to be a part of our life to this day.
Yeah.
Well, now, I don't want to talk about my conversion story other than to say it was maybe a year later, right around the time of the birth of our first son, Brandon.
It was later. Okay, so we got married we got married May 27th in 2000.
Mm-hmm. And then Brandon was born June 8th, 2001.
Yeah.
And I think he was a fairly young baby when I
He was not a baby, because I remember when he was 1, you went on that camping trip with your dad. And you came back at the beginning of that summer.
2002
so it was 2000.
It must have been 2002.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I became a believer in the summer of 2002. Talk for a minute about what kind of friction that caused between us for the next couple of years.
That caused a lot of friction because Chris has a tendency to get into...
I go whole hog when I pick up something new for a while.
Yeah. Warhammer paintings.
Yeah. I bought a whole bunch of... This is like 10 years ago. I bought a whole bunch of Warhammer figurines. I don't think I ever played a game with them. Painted like a few of them, and then ended up wasting all the rest of the money I poured.
Like he would say, we're gonna get back into doing Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
I have to buy every new edition of Dungeons and Dragons that's been printed.
This is true. So surely then that must have been to some extent what you thought might be going on.
Exactly. So when he came back from this camping trip with his dad, he went and bought a Bible. And I said, "Why are you buying a Bible?" And he's like, "Well, we'll be talking to my dad, and I'm interested in learning this." And I thought, okay, whatever. Get some books, that's fine. But then more books started coming, and more, and then it was a lot more. And then the way he started speaking was changing. And he started saying things that were pushing our friends away, that nobody wanted to really come around anymore, because all Chris wanted to do was beat the Bible into everybody. And it was frustrating because, again, we're young, especially as a new mother by myself, stay-at-home mom. I wanted my friends around, and they didn't want to come around anymore because Chris was going to preach to them. And it made things very, very hard because I knew my parents were married until I was 25. So my grandparents were married until my grandfather died 10 years ago. I had, even though, family problems, I'm not going to get into my personal family problems, but even though those years were hurt by a lot, my parents were together, and I was not going to have a divorced house. So when we agreed at the age of 20, we are getting married, and no matter what, this is for our life. And then 2 years into that was not what my life was. And I was not happy, and it was very hard. And so I started finding myself rebelling against the things that he was saying. I didn't want to hear any of it. I would roll my eyes. I would get angry when he would go to church each week. For Halloween that year, or it might have been the year later, I dressed as the devil just to tick him off, just to spite him.
And I think you weren't comfortable coming to my baptism, and it's totally okay.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I don't regret things. You can't regret things because ultimately God is in control of everything. So if you dwell on things, there's nothing you can do. It just eats away at you. But I do, probably my number one regret is that I was not there for Chris for his baptism, because that is such an amazing declaration, a beautiful experience, and he was there by himself. And I'm so proud that he did it. But it still just breaks my heart to look back and think that he was there by himself. When I was baptized, I had family and my kids, and it was a beautiful experience. And it breaks my heart.
You know what's funny about that, and it's just occurred to me after 20 years, you're always pulling that card of, oh, nobody took me to prom.
Oh,
well,
man.
now I'm going to start using the card of, hey, you didn't come to my baptism.
Babe, golden ticket. I get to complain forever now.
Yeah, we'll come back to the golden ticket shortly. Okay. Well, so there was this friction. I was a believer and you weren't for a few years.
Yeah.
What changed? What eventually brought you around?
I got pregnant with our second son, Logan, in 2004. And by that time, Chris had been into this for a couple years. He had found a good church, a great support system to outlet all of his newfound knowledge and people to bounce some ideas off of. And he kind of backed off a little bit. So it was kind of freeing because it gave me the opportunity to actually stop being so stubborn and stop blocking the things out he was saying and actually start to listen to the words that he was speaking. And the main thing that really kind of got me was, at the time Brandon was like 3 years old, and he started going to preschool, and Chris said, hey, I want to make sure that when our kids are in school, they are not just being taught this. I want them to have other options. And I agreed with that because, like I said, I never had those other options. I was never presented those different ideas. It was just figure it out yourself. And I didn't want to do that to my kids, you know. If you want people to make choices, you have to give them opportunities to make those choices. And so he got some dinosaur books. Was it R.C. Sproul?
No, probably the dinosaur stuff was somebody that I'm not a big fan of anymore, called Dr. Dino. But anyway.
Yeah, it was about some creationism kind of things and different ideas on evolution and things. And I am a huge, history, I'm not into really science, but I love history and things like that. And just listening to Chris read these books to our 3 and 4-year-old son, I was just kind of, some of the things that they were talking about, it just kind of, something in it started coming to my head, and I was like, wow, I never learned that in school. But that actually kind of makes sense. That sounds like, okay, that might be, something I could look into. But I did not say anything to him. I did not ask a question. I didn't say anything. So then I don't know what it was exactly, but something in me just started kind of speaking to me, to my heart. And when we were signing Brandon up for preschool at a Lutheran preschool, I don't know if I remember. I think I mentioned to Chris. I said, hey, I think I might want to try going to church with you this weekend. And he just stared at me and he just said, okay.
Inside my heart's probably
dying. But he said, okay. And I was like, oh, thank God he didn't just freak out and attack me. And, because I didn't want to get him too excited, because I wasn't quite sure yet. So I went. And at the time, too, my dad had actually started going to church with Chris. He would come down every once in a while and go to church, and he would always say, I wrote your name in the prayer box. And I'd say, okay, Dad, thanks. And so I was like, I think I'm going to go to church with you. And Logan had been born. So this was in April 2005. Logan was, that's when he was born, April 2005. So it might have been June when this happened. And so I remember bringing him to church and went a couple times. And then at the end of that summer, I was getting ready to, like I said, sorry, Joel brain, getting ready to get Brandon enrolled in this preschool, and I hadn't really gotten into the church thing because I was just trying to see what it felt like, okay? And so when we were filling out this paperwork for this Lutheran preschool, which we weren't Lutheran, a lot of preschools.
But a lot of preschools are Lutheran, yeah, Christian preschools.
Yeah. And so you're filling out the paperwork, and it says, what church do you attend? And so I wrote the church that Chris went to, and
do you think this was still at lifebites.org or in Auburn, like right after the Kent Bridge in Auburn?
I think it was before they changed in the Life Bites. It was, that's where you met the Mellows. Oh my gosh. That's been 20 years.
That was Pastor Rod Shockley.
Wow. Yeah.
And Life Bites was just the name of the website. I don't remember what the name of the church is. Anyway,
I'm sure Lori and Dan, and if they're watching, I'm sure they know. But man, we have known them forever, you guys. Anyway, so I was filling out this paperwork, and on the bottom of it, it said they wanted the parents to fill out, and it said, "Have you accepted the Lord Jesus Christ as your Savior?" And I was like, I don't even know what that means. And at this point, I didn't want to say that I was praying, because that to me was an admission. I said, I'm talking to God sometimes, but it all seemed so intimidating. Like, how do you pray? What does that mean? What's the process? What do I say? How am I supposed to communicate? That was never anything that I'd ever even thought about doing. So I said I would just talk to God sometimes. So I laid on the bed and I just thought about that question. And so I started talking to God, and I said, I don't know quite what that means. I don't know what that entails, but I feel really good. And I think that, yeah. And I said, so I just laid back and I closed my eyes and I said, yes, God, I accept you as my Lord and Savior. I really do. And this feeling of just cold warmth, I can't even explain it, just went over my entire body. And it sounds so ridiculous, and I don't want to sound like all supernatural stuff, but it was amazing. And it was like this freedom that I'd never felt before. And it was like, that's it. That's all I needed to hear. I was new. Like, it was just everything from that point just changed and clicked, and everything started falling into line. And it was the most amazing feeling. And from that second on, I wanted everybody to know who Jesus was. And I was like, no, I'm turning into Chris. I don't want to be the Bible beater. So I backed up a little bit, but
I don't think you ever were.
I wasn't. No, I try to be as non-confrontational as possible, but it was incredible. It was incredible. And I've told that story so many times, and people say, wow, I wish that I could have had an experience like that. And I don't like when people compare their what's the word I'm looking for? Conversion stories. Testimony. That's what I'm looking for. I don't like when people necessarily share testimonies, because it can sound dramatic and ridiculous, and I'm afraid it comes across as insincere. But then I don't want people to be like, oh, I never had that. I grew up in religion. You're so lucky. But I don't think that any conversion story is any stronger or more powerful than anyone's. It's all a miracle. Even if you grow up in the religion and you don't come to God until later, or that God's been in your heart forever, it's all beautiful. So that was my story, though. So, yep.
Well, so in the years since, the 17, 18 years since then, talk about the role that Christ has played in your life. What has he meant to you, and how has it impacted your daily life?
I have always been a very high-strung person. Lot of coming in from the oldest of my family of 3, and just like I keep hinting at, a lot of family trauma. I felt like I had a lot put upon me at a young age, and so I've always taken on a lot of anxious roles in my life. A lot of people that I feel like I have to take care of and make sure everything's in line and being okay and everybody's safe, and that was really hard, especially at a young age, as being a young mother, a new marriage, being 20, 22 years old. That's a lot to take on. And so it was so freeing to finally know that wasn't on my shoulders. I can only do so much. And so I think when I found God, very quickly, I learned, not to say that I don't still get anxieties, because I'm a very strong person still, or high-strung person. But it helped me realize that I don't have to be anxious about everything. One of the first Bible verses that Chris actually ever gave me to meditate on was, this is my favorite phrase. Somewhere in the Bible it says something like, and I know it's in Matthew, about don't worry about the, if God, something about the birds.
Something like if God has dressed flowers and birds as beautifully as he has. Think of what how he's gonna care for you.
Yeah, and so that stuck with me. And
that's not a verse that features in the hell debate, so it's not in my memory.
So he's doing this somewhere in the Bible. It says
exactly.
But yeah, it was that idea that those are not my worries. I cannot carry the worries of everything else. God is worrying about me, and that's okay. And he's going to be there and help me to get through. And so that was very helpful in those early years. And still, every day, it's still something. If I get too anxious, I'm just like, hey, calm down. What is getting worried about this gonna do except stress you out? You just got to figure it out. Yeah. It'll be fine.
Well, now I titled the episode Christ, Calvinism, and Cancer. We're going to talk about cancer in a moment. We've just talked about Christ. I want to talk just for a minute before we shift to the cancer part about Calvinism. And, you're not as big of a theological nerd as I am, so I'm going to not use all the big terms. But one of the tenets of Calvinism, or at least one of the things most Calvinists, including myself, believe, is that God has preordained everything that takes place in time. It's not stuff is happening and God is working things out from them. It's that he has planned it all to happen in the way that it has. Mm-hmm. And I think you have believed in that with me for almost as long as you've been a Christian. So what role does that belief play in your life? How does it help you or hurt you or challenge you?
It frees me from the idea that I have any control over it. If we were all just here, I just feel like it would be. Sorry, I'm getting a little flippy floppy back and forth in my brain. Chaos to me is scary. The unknown, fear of I don't know what's gonna happen. I know what's gonna happen. What's gonna happen? So if I focus on that chaos and the uncertainty, that's all I'm gonna be thinking about and worrying about. But if I can just remind myself that is not in my control, it's gonna happen whether I have anything to do with it or not. And it's not my responsibility, that's God's responsibility. That frees me up so much. And it makes me feel more secure because I know that it's ultimately going to be okay, no matter what happens. I may not like the outcome. I may not like what it's going to take to get there, but it's gonna happen the way it's going to happen. And me worrying about it, fretting over it, I literally can do nothing except just go along for the ride. It's scary at times, but it's very freeing. That's not my responsibility, because can you imagine being the one in charge of that? No, thank you. I got enough to worry about. I don't need to rule the world. No,
sure.
Thank you.
Well, and I think there have been examples where we've seen what appears to be the divine purpose behind some of the things that we've suffered.
Oh my gosh.
Do you mind if talking for a moment about the experience we had not long after our second miscarriage when you went to Scotland with Kenzie and how that...
Yeah, a little bit. I don't want to get into too many other people's private experiences, but so we have 4 kids. We've had 6 pregnancies. So we were actually, keep in mind we were atheists, but and we lived together before we got married, but when we got married, I was pregnant. I don't know how far along. I'm guessing anywhere from 7 to 9 weeks. And our our whole wedding was just kind of a disaster from beginning to end. It's the wedding is, I'm a photographer. I'm a wedding photographer. And it kills me when I see these young kids and they're freaking out and they're like, no, everything is going off the rails. And I always say to my brides, calm down. This day, ultimately, it doesn't matter. What matters is the marriage. It's not the wedding, it's the marriage. So that's just what, you just got to hold on to that. But we did have miscarriage on our honeymoon 2 days after we got married. So that kind of cut that trip short, rushed home from that. So, and then we had Brandon in 2001, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. And then we had Logan in 2005. And then we had Sawyer in 2009. And then we'll finish up with Miles in that time. But so all of our boys we'd planned to have them, about 4 years apart. That's how it worked out. But when Sawyer was 2, we got pregnant unexpectedly. And at 17 weeks, went in for a checkup, just a normal checkup, and there was no heartbeat. And they think that we lost the baby at about 16 weeks. And that's one thing, if I can just comment on really quick. Those stories need to be shared, because especially being like when we were 20 and we lost that baby, people don't talk about miscarriages enough and baby loss. And 1 out of every 4 pregnancies, up to 20 weeks, ends in miscarriage. That's a lot. And that is scary, especially when you're young and you don't hear those
Isn't
signs.
it a lot of people's first pregnancies as well?
Yeah. 1 out of every 4. And I mean, that worked. I got pregnant 6 times and I lost 2 babies. So it averages out. So, but you hit past your 12 weeks and you're like, we're fine, we're good. Well, that didn't happen that way. And so we lost baby Joshua. Was another boy. And we don't know what that first baby was.
Probably was a boy.
Probably a boy. My grandmother has 4 boys. My sister has 4 boys. So we're boy breeders. No more babies. We're done. Unless the Lord sends a baby in our arms somehow, but we're good, God. We're
We've
good.
tried to do what we can to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, we're good. But God, God surprises you.
He does.
But we don't want any more surprises this year, please. Anyway, so we lost baby Joshua, and that was hard. I kind of pushed myself away from people. That's a whole other story, but I fell into, I went through 5-pound party bags of M&Ms once a week for about a year. It was a dark time. But on the other side of that, once I got through that depression and came out on the other side, okay, a friend of mine and I went to Scotland, and it was a long trip. We'd been there for 2 weeks. We started in Paris, then we went to Scotland, and on the train to Scotland, we bumped into this couple. They were sitting across from us. They're from America too, and we could tell they were having a stressful time. They had been in England for about a week, and it was just you could see a lot of tension between them. And my friend and I were best friends. We've known each other since we were 12. But we were kind of hitting a point where it was like, we needed a little bit of a break too. So it was nice to have another couple to talk to. It's a 4 or 5 hour train ride. And I noticed that the girl across from me, the couple, she was reading the same book I was reading. We were both reading Outlander. And so we're like, hey. And so we just kind of started talking and made fast friends. And then, got to Scotland, went to our separate hotels. And my friend said, I really liked that couple. And we exchanged phone numbers and said, hey, maybe we'll meet up. And we had planned a couple days later to go to the Highlands together. Kenzie and I were renting a car and we were going to drive to the Highlands. We went to Edinburgh. We were going to drive to Inverness to the Highlands. And so I said, would you want to see if they want to go with us? And she said, I was thinking the same thing. So we texted them and said, hey, I know it's kind of weird. We just met this morning, but would you guys want to drive up with us to Inverness in a couple days? And immediately, yes, please. And so we met up with them a couple days later. Kenzie, bless her heart, she got the flu. And I'm like, I can't drive this car, Kenzie, you have to drive. So praise Jesus, Kenzie, powered through. She did amazing. So we met up with them, and from the beginning, you could tell they were having a hard time. So, we just kind of spent the day viewing castles and stuff. And it was just, there was clearly something. We had a great time. We had an amazing, beautiful time. Oh, you can put some pictures of this truck.
Oh, there you go.
We'll put them in there.
You're going to have to get me a bunch of pictures to weave in over the course of this.
I got time. We were at dinner. We ended up, of all places, in Inverness. Quick tip, you go to Inverness to make a dinner reservation. You will not find a place to eat. We didn't know that. So at 9:00 at night, 4-hour drive from Edinburgh, we end up in Inverness and we're at a Jamaican restaurant. Yeah, it was an experience. Anyway, so Kenzie, I think she went to the bathroom or something, and the wife, I'm going to keep names out, she went to the bathroom, and her husband, I was sitting there with him, and he said, I have to really thank you. This has been a really hard trip for us, and it's been a good day. And then he let me know that the day before they left for their trip, that this trip was supposed to be a baby moon. I don't know, I want to cry. It was supposed to be a baby moon. For those of you who don't know, a baby moon is like a final trip you take before your baby comes. And they'd been saving, and they were so excited because after a very long marriage, they finally had a baby coming. And the day or a couple days before, I'm not exact the details at this point anymore, but they lost their baby. And he said we couldn't cancel the trip, so we were hoping that this trip was going to be healing for us, but it had been harder than they expected. And I started crying. And I said, oh my gosh. I said, I know why God put us here together. And they were both, they're Christians. And I said, I've lost 2 babies. I am so sorry going through this. And we just started talking, and it just immediately, like, we've been friends ever since. And it was very clear to me that everything that I went through, all the struggles I went through, the depression, the M&Ms, the endless M&Ms, everything brought me to be there to give them even just a little bit of a break, a little bit of something different, something new, a new friendship, just something to help heal, even just give them just a little tiny piece of just a minute of a day of something unexpected and exciting that they could just get away from walking around together through this foreign country, just thinking about how much they wanted to be back home and how sad they were.
Yeah.
And we've been friends since. I've traveled with her again to Scotland, and I can insert another picture. We went back to that restaurant, she and I together. No Kenzie last time, unfortunately, but took another picture outside, and they are just beautiful, amazing people, and I can't wait to travel with them again someday, because it was a beautiful moment. And so that was probably one of the first times that I really did see purpose in a major struggle that I had to go through.
Yeah.
It ended even just one little spark of something, and these beautiful new people that have been brought into my life who I will now cherish forever from a horrible, tragic loss. So, yeah.
Well, let's start shifting gears to a much more recent struggle, to use a word you used a moment ago.
Okay.
As I said, the title of this episode is Christ, Calvinism, and Cancer. And that's something that we discovered that you're going to be fighting a couple of weeks ago. But before we talk about that, we've since realized that the signs that this was something that you were going through were appearing sometime before we actually went to the ER that day. So maybe you could talk a little bit about what kinds of things, looking back, do you realize were not normal, were not typical, that had we been more conscious, we might have noticed and done something about?
Well, I don't know if I would have even been more conscious. I mean, I can tell you, well, let's see. I guess I could just jump back really quick and say, my mom, when I was in my teens, my mom started developing migraine issues. My mom, thankfully, I don't look it, but I'm actually quite healthy. My mom is really the only one on really either side of my family that has like a lot of health issues, blood pressure and head problems and things. And so in my late teens, mostly, well, I guess, yeah, because it happened before I got pregnant. So late teens, really, I started getting migraines. So I went and saw her neurologist, and when I got pregnant with Brandon, I dealt with some headaches and migraines. They got me on some medication that I could take while I was pregnant, because I was adamant about, I don't like taking medicine, this is all very overwhelming for me, that I'm going to be putting these chemicals in my body, because I don't like medicine. But they taught me how to recognize like triggers, so I could, oh, you're getting a migraine? Okay, quick. This is what we're going to do. We're going to take care of it. So I've been really good about anytime I get a headache, taking care of it. And I mean, there have been moments where I've been debilitated over the past 20 years where, like I remember Christmas a few years ago where I had to stay up till like 3 o'clock in the morning wrapping presents, and I was throwing up because my headache hurt so much. But it's been a long time since I've had any headaches. And so I guess it was in probably I don't even know. Probably the beginning of September, middle of September, I started getting headaches a little more frequently, and I found myself taking more ibuprofen. And these headaches were a little bit different. They weren't like my typical up front here headaches. They were more back here. And, I pile a lot on myself. I'm a photographer. I homeschool my kids. I have 4 children. I say children, 2 of them are grown. I work for the church. I take on a lot of roles with friends, and
God knows I'm a huge burden as well.
oh gosh, the biggest. But I have a lot that I overload myself with, and I'm one of those people who I'm constantly like, I just have to get through this couple weeks. I have to get through this few months, and then we're planning this trip that I'd been planning for almost a year that was coming, and it was just a lot all at once. And then I, for some reason, decided, hey, Halloween, my favorite time of year, is coming. I already have to worry about costumes and decorating. Why don't I throw on an artistic photography project as well? So then I spent 2 months doing all this work for photography and just for fun photography, because it's been years since I've done that. It was a lot. And so my headaches started back here in the back of my head. And I'm like, great, now I'm getting tension headaches. I need to calm down. Once I get to Florida, I'll be able to calm down. Well, then they started kind of shooting headaches in the back of my head. And I thought, well, that's different.
What do you mean by shooting? I've heard you use that a couple times.
Like sticking, like there was sticking in me, like kind of sharp pains in my head. And that was new. Well, later in September, I believe it was September, a mutual friend of somebody, acquaintance I had met through friends years ago, who I just, you make friends on Facebook and you just follow along. Well, she had posted, unfortunately, that her husband was having some headache problems. I think he was passing out, blacking out. I think I'd have to go back and look. I'm sorry for any inconsistencies or anything in the true story, but that's just basically what I remember. And she had posted that they went to the hospital, and he had been diagnosed with I can't pronounce it.
You're very close. When you say glioblastoma, it's glioblastoma.
Glioblastoma. So I don't know if you guys know what that is. I didn't know what it was. It sounded serious.
It is serious.
And I was like, wow, what is that? I'm curious what happened. Oh my gosh, that sounds horrible. And so I looked it up and found out it is a stage 4 brain tumor. And it's
pretty much terminal. I think.
Yeah. And I went, wow, that's terrifying. I cannot imagine what they are going through. And it killed me. It absolutely broke my heart. This is a beautiful family, does amazing things. They're both photographers, I believe. I know she is, at least. They have a son, just great, beautiful family. And it broke my heart because they're not much, they're just maybe a few years older than us. And I haven't been to the doctor. I don't go to the doctor, okay? I've been to the doctor since I had Miles in 2009, September 2009. That was the last time I've been to a doctor. I could have pink eye, strep throat, my finger falling off. Chris will be like, we should go to the doctor. I'll say, I'm fine, give me a Band-Aid. I will not go. I don't like to be a burden. I don't like to cause problems. I don't like to go out of my way to do things like take care of myself.
Well, that's not only that. You've also got a fear, and this is understandable because it's happened, that we're going to spend hours out of our day, not just our time, but also the doctors and nurses' time, only to be told, oh, here's some anti-inflammatory, go back home, nothing.
Exactly.
No big
deal.
All
just seems like a waste of time to me. So it's like, whatever. I'm not going to deal with it. And I thought that would be horrible. Well, then my headaches started picking up. And because I've said many times I'm an anxious person, and I can tend to be a little bit of a hypochondriac. Sometimes I get a little dramatic in my head. I get myself worked up, and then I go, stop being stupid. That's ridiculous. The idea of what happened to him and what they were facing started just eating away in my brain.
Excuse the really morbid pun.
I'm a little dark. A little dark and twisted. Got a dark side of me. But it just started making me think, like, man, maybe I haven't been to the doctor in a really long time. We're getting up there. It would be good to just maybe go get checked. Chris is actually smart and goes to the doctor sometimes when he needs to, or get checks up every once in a while. But not me. I won't do that. I worry about my kids, worry about Chris. Don't worry about me. I just need to get to Florida. That was all it was. I need to get to Florida, then everything will be fine. Then I can relax and we can figure it out. But as time was going on, looking back now, I didn't pay attention to these things before. Okay, so this has been a couple months now. And now, because my doctors have been asking me to think, really try your best, which is hard right now, think about anything that may have been triggering to you. And then I started noticing weird things. Like, I can look back now, and recognize things were different. September, October, August is all very busy times for a photographer. It's when everybody wants back to school pictures, everybody wants their Christmas pictures done. And I was getting busy, and I started getting frustrated with clients. And I shouldn't be saying this in case any of my clients are watching. I adore and love and cherish every single one of you, and I get so excited to see you every single year. It brings me so much joy. Watching these families grow with me is like, I love what I do because I get to see these families grow. It's beautiful. But I was getting really irritated, and it had nothing to do with my clients. Of course, they're asking for pictures because they're paying me, and I'm trying my best. I'm trying to get work done. I got all this stuff piling up, but I was having such a hard time editing pictures. My programs didn't seem to work. I couldn't get my technology. Like, I was saving files and they were ending up in weird places. And I'm like, oh gosh, now I got to edit these again. My colors weren't appearing the way that they were supposed to. It was just so frustrating. And I just kept saying, I just have to get through just finish it so I can get through our trip. Then I can worry about what's going on. But then I started noticing things were just really frustrating. I was super irritable toward everything. And now we're finding out I've been treating Chris horribly, and
That's
I didn't even realize.
You just got a little more irritable than usual with me, and
I'm usually pretty irritable as it is, so I'm real sorry.
No.
But it was just really hard to get things done, and I was blaming. I'm like, okay, now I gotta delete the software again and re-upload it. Can you help me get my drivers loaded? Something's wrong. My computer's failing. I'm not great with computers anyway. We are very opposite. It's amazing that we've ended up because.
Well, you know what Paula Abdul says.
Opposite track, baby.
That's right.
2 steps forward, 2 steps back. Oh gosh, we're old. But things were just getting more difficult, and I'm blaming everything around me and not noticing that it has nothing to do with any of this stuff. There's something wrong.
But you didn't know that at the time.
I didn't realize that. Looking back now, it's very clear to me, which is very encouraging, because once all this stuff starts getting clear, that means, oh, thank goodness, I can get back into the stuff that brings me joy. And I mean, blocks bring me joy, but you know what I mean. And so one thing that really started happening, I'm not very good with my phone to begin with. If I can just carry around a little spiral notebook and write things down, unfortunately you can't write a note and send it to somebody real quick. You actually have to type it. And so Chris likes to lovingly, we'll say, constantly mock my grammar.
That's not true. I do that like 1 out of 5 times you do.
Yeah, so what does that say? How many times are you just letting it slide?
More than you know.
Yeah, I know. Well, I know, I'm sure. But I've always usually blamed autocorrect. I try to be so diligent when I type a message to go back and like, I have to fix it because everybody's not going to understand what I'm saying, and Chris is going to mock me when he comes downstairs. She's going to say, oh, you mean goo, not good. It never ends. Love you.
Good impression.
Thanks. And so it was getting harder and harder, and to get my words to appear, like I kept correcting it a lot more. I'm like, why is this not, something's wrong with my phone. And this was, I think it was like October by this time. And I was talking to my son, my 17-year-old Logan, and he actually ended up getting an appendicitis a few days before we left for Florida, which was like fantastic. Now I got to leave my kid here by himself because our older boys didn't go on our trip with us. So that was like, oh, that's one more thing. Now I have to try to make doctor's appointments for Logan on the other side of the country for checkups. And so we were in the hospital waiting for, for them to take him in. And I was trying to type a message. And I said, I don't know what is wrong. I can't type on my phone lately. My autocorrect. And he said, oh, did you do the new install? And I said, I think so. And he goes, that's probably what it is. I think people are having problems with the keyboard. And I went, oh, that must be it. That made sense to me. And then I mentioned to him, and I'd actually mentioned this to Chris before, that I had a hard time finding familiarity in things. Things started seeming different. Like I said, the editing pictures and using my computer software that I was very proficient in editing with these programs, that I was having a hard time figuring out. I'm like, I don't know what is going on with me lately, but it feels like I'm missing something. And he's like, wow, that's really weird. And I had figured, like, if I can find something, like things weren't sounding right. Like I felt like I was missing layers of sound in things that I'm very familiar with. One thing I am very familiar with is The Office, greatest show ever created. And
American version. Although the British one's great too. But
they're both fantastic for their own reasons, but I tend to... I have to have noise around me all the time, just something to like occupy my time, my brain when I'm doing things. And so it's usually I just have The Office on. I know those episodes inside and out. And I watch a lot of podcasts and listen to a lot of podcasts, and it wasn't feeling the way that these things are feeling. So I'm like, I know, I'm going to watch an episode of The Office. If I can watch some of The Office, it'll recenter things, and then things will line up, and I'll be like, oh yeah, just so I know, I'm trying to think what I'm saying now. Just if I can find something that I know securely, this is the way this is supposed to be. This is what this laugh track sounds like at this point. This is how this joke lands. Andy's going to be making this sound effect in the back at this point. And as long as that all lines up, I'll be fine. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to watch a couple of the episodes of The Office. And that wasn't happening. It wasn't lining up. And then I was like, well, that seems strange. I couldn't connect with it. Something that that is so familiar to my heart and so comforting to me, it wasn't there. There was like the emotion, whatever you want to call it, it was different. And then I started getting a little more worried. And I was like, something's not right. And then I started feeling almost like I was viewing and experiencing things, I think I said this, but through like a fog. Like it wasn't there. Things just didn't seem the way they should have been, the way that they should be. I still can't even like it.
No, I think you're explaining it very well.
Okay. Whew,
no, I think you're explaining it very well. Now, I remember toward the beginning of November, we were talking about this kind of stuff. We not everything you just got done describing had stood out to us, but some of the things you did we were aware of, and we were thinking maybe we need to make an appointment to see a neurologist when you get back. But also we were thinking, we're out of shape, we're not taking care of ourselves, we're overstressing ourselves. So we were kind of, if I remember correctly, we were thinking let's go unwind, have a good vacation in Orlando,
and not worry about it.
We'll start to get into better shape because we'll be doing a lot of walking and we'll keep it up when we get back. And we thought that maybe that alone would get rid of some of these problems.
Yeah.
But then we went to Disney World and things didn't exactly work out as we'd hoped. So
Florida is cursed. It really is. The first time we went, it wasn't that great of a trip. We went a few years ago. This time it was just one disaster. I'm very thankful we went. We spent great time with my in-laws, with Chris's mom and stepdad. And I'm glad that we got this time for our younger boys to have that experience. But it was not at all what we thought it was going to be. There were probably some dangerous choices, like driving through a tropical storm in the middle of the night at like 2 o'clock in the morning, that I surely have really not been driving now, knowing.
Yeah.
I had no idea. The grace of God, we made it and everything. And then we all started getting the flu. Not all of us at the time, but we've all kind of, I think you're the only one that escaped.
I was pretty sick the day we got back, but I kind of held it together because.
Well, thanks, because I had no idea. But one morning our Sawyer, our 13-year-old, slipped and fell in the bathtub before we went out for the day, and we had to leave the park halfway. We missed at least one full park. It was one disaster after another, and it was like, great, we're here. We're supposed to be relaxing. Nothing is going the way it's supposed to. But along all this path and this trip, I started recognizing, like, I should not be driving this car. I don't feel right in this car. I couldn't understand the directions that were being given, and I was frustrated. At first, I'm like, Florida needs to get better with Google Maps and figure out how to get
To be fair, Google Maps was messing up at some points there in Orlando.
I'm glad it wasn't
they
just
didn't
me.
know what they were doing.
It was confusing, but I'm like, what is with this place? Like, nothing is going right. Like, it was just bizarre. Everything was bizarre. It just felt strange. The whole time just felt strange.
Disney is usually a real magical place for you, but it too was not quite everything it normally is.
It wasn't. I feel like we missed 3/4 of a trip that we paid for.
That's a little.
But the kids had fun. They still enjoyed it. They didn't get to do everything that we want to do, but we've talked to them and they've had, it was good, but it was a struggle to get through it. It really was. And then I remember I don't know how far you want to jump, just pass through all that, but
so there were a few things, especially toward the tail end of the trip, that really started to get me worried. The one thing, and this is what, more than anything else, is what had me get you to the emergency room when we got back, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the Saturday night, the night before we returned back, you sent me some messages, and it wasn't just some misspellings here and there or some typos. It was almost no English in it at all. It was just all gibberish, like 3 messages.
And I knew what I was saying. I knew exactly what I was telling him. I knew what I was saying. And I had sent him messages the night before, and he's like, what is this message? And I looked at it, and I said, oh, that wasn't for you. That was for Sarah, for my friend. I said, that's not for you. It doesn't matter. And he said, okay, well, what does it say? I said, it doesn't matter what it says. I was talking to her about something else. It doesn't matter. And it was frustrating me. And actually, well, I had my friends now are telling me that they're like, yeah, you usually do a lot of typos. I don't usually fix too many typos when I message close friends. It's usually just but they're like, yeah, we've noticed lately you've been sending a lot of numbers and symbols instead of letters, but we didn't want to say anything. And I'm like, guys, you could have said something, but your friends love you. They don't want to upset you or offend you. So if you notice people doing that, say hey, did you mean to say that? But anyway, so I sent him this message, and I had been feeling sick. I had got the flu at this point, and TMI, but I was throwing up. And so I was just letting him know, hey, I got sick in the bathroom. I cleaned it up.
But even like throwing up was not the usual way you'd throw up.
It wasn't.
Usually you'd make it into a toilet.
And I threw up everywhere. Like lost control, and that is not me. I've been a perfect puker since the time I can walk.
I should get you a badge for perfect puker,
because I hate cleaning up vomit.
It's gross.
So my kids, from the time they could stand on their own 2 feet, they get their little butts to the bathroom. We rarely have any incidents with our kids. I'm very proud of that. Thank you. So yeah.
And then Sunday morning, as we were getting ready to leave the rental to go to the airport, Miles noticed that you only had one shoe on.
Yeah, I had one shoe on. And I was so confused. I'm like, what are you talking about?
In fact, I said, babe, you only have one shoe on. And he said, no, I've got both shoes on. I said, no, you don't. And you looked down and realized that we were telling you the truth.
Yeah.
And then like at the airport,
after my little 9-year-old angel, he's my little guardian, he noticed something was wrong. So he was walking, he was staying close with me through security, and he was helping me put my shoes on because I kept trying to put them on the wrong feet. I was dropping things. He's picking things up. Here, Mommy. He's picking stuff up for me. Here, Mommy, hold on to this. And it's just shocking to me what he noticed. That's a gift. It was amazing.
So this was Sunday. We're on the plane. We get home. You run up to bed, and you pretty much stay in bed until the next morning. So
I'll just say, too, I remember being in the airport when we got back, even on the plane and stuff. I'm just now thinking about this, walking like down the aisle in the plane to go to the bathroom. People were staring at me, and it was driving. I don't like people looking at me. This is very weird. But I could see people looking at me, giving me dirty looks like, what is wrong with her? Is she on drugs? I was very fumbly. I was running into things. I felt so bad going down the aisles because I kept bumping into people. But it wasn't just like normal, oh, oops, sorry, turbulence. Like I was like on drugs.
Yeah.
And people were just getting irritated with me. And Chris was like, I'm going to go get the car, sit down. I went to get the Starbucks line. This lady's like, are you even supposed to be in line? And I'm like, I don't know. Yeah. It was very difficult because then I'm not thinking there's something wrong with me.
Yeah, I didn't know.
I'm thinking there's people thinking I'm something. Chris needs to get here with the car. We have to get that guy out of here. So, yeah, looking back, it was bad, and I had no idea that it was that bad.
So, okay, so that was Sunday. Now Monday morning, my hope is this is the people that are watching now. This was 2 weeks prior to you watching. So Monday, and. I thought that a lot of your negative experiences that day were because you had caught the flu or something like the flu, like Miles and Sawyer had gotten. And so I figured Monday morning you'd be feeling a little bit better, and I'd feel a little bit at ease.
And you had a doctor's appointment that morning that you had to go to?
I called in sick for that because, like I said, I did get some of the flu or whatever we had. But But then you got up and nothing had changed, right? You were still feeling
woke up
just
and
as
I had a
bad.
headache, and I was like, I was just like, okay, I'll find a doctor today. Hopefully I'll get in. Because when you're like, I need to see a neurologist. I had asked a friend, I have a friend who's a nurse, and I said, hey, at your hospital, do you guys work with neurologists? On a community group page a few days before in Florida, I said, does anybody have a name of a good neurologist? And my plan was we're going to get back. I'm going to find a primary care physician, because I haven't been to a doctor in almost 10 years. I'm going to find a doctor. We'll get in, checked up, we'll be fine. I had no intention of going anywhere. And I thought at the worst, I'll let him take me to the urgent care if he has to, but I'm going to fight it tooth and nail because I'm stubborn and digging my heels in because, but yeah.
Well, and to this day, I'm not 100% sure why
God.
Well, God, yes, but I mean, like, what means did he use to convince me to take you to the ER? Because, like, I was fine with just you making an appointment. It might be a couple of weeks and whatever, but something in me was like, something in me wanted to find an excuse to get you into urgent care or something.
Yeah.
And I decided, you know what, the neurological issues combined with the flu-like symptoms was enough to maybe justify getting you in somewhere.
I think it was that message. I think it was.
Well, that message that you sent me on Saturday night it did stand out, yes.
Yeah.
And I think that what made me decide not to take you to urgent care, but to the emergency room, is because only a couple of weeks earlier I'd been there to the urgent care with Logan, and they didn't have MRI machines or anything. And I thought, if I'm going to take you to either urgent care or the hospital, I want them, just in case they decide they want to be able to do a brain scan. And so I was like, well, I know good Sam, their ER has one, so I'm going to get you there.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like pulling teeth, getting you out of bed.
It was. He said, get up, get some clothes on, we're going to the hospital. I said, I'm not going to the hospital. I will call a doctor. Leave me alone. I'm tired. I said, I don't even have any clothes up here. Our suitcases were still in the car. And he said, no, we brought them in. They're up there. Get dressed. I was so mad. I'm looking at that text going, gosh.
I even give you step by step. Here's how you get out of bed. Sit up, number 1. Number 2, turn so that your feet are dangling off the bed. Number 3.
I was so mad. And I was like, great, now I'm going to spend all flipping day at the ER.
And we did.
And we spent the next 5 days at the flipping ER.
That's a good point.
I mean, I had the pants I grabbed, the zipper was broken. I hadn't showered since Friday night. I was not in the position to be going to the hospital.
I don't know if you went to the hospital this way or if it happened at some point in your...
Oh, great, something new.
No, but at some point you realized you had your hoodie on but no shirt under it.
Oh,
Remember
yeah,
that?
yeah.
And
Thank God I was wearing undergarments. Yeah. But I was talking to my friend, to Roger, and he said, this is why your mother always says growing up, wear clean underwear before you go out, because you never know where you're going to end up. Right. I will now be living that advice.
That's right.
So, yeah.
So we got you to the ER finally at around, it was something like 11 a.m. It was
I didn't even know what time it was.
It was several hours before we finally got in and got to see somebody. They did some. Do you want to talk about the neurological test they did with you after we explained everything?
Yeah. So they run through and they ask you what's going on and just really quick kind of tell them what's happening. Excuse me. And they had me do these and then do this, and I used to play the violin, so I'm like, oh, I can do finger techniques, thinking I got this in the bag. I can walk a straight line, and I did fine with all of that. And I think what was the kicker. There was one point where they said, he said, walk from here to the other end. And I walked, and he said, okay, now put your hands out. And I had my hands out, and my hands started shaking.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I'm not my mom problems, she has nerve kind of shaky things sometimes. And I went, oh no, it's coming. I'm turning into her again. Oh no, I'm going to have shaky nerves. And we sat down. They're like, okay, go sit down. So I sat down next to Chris. And I remember raising my hand and looking at it and thinking, look, I'm still kind of shaking now. And I remember thinking, that's not really normal. I don't shake like this. And you're like, yeah, that's you're shaking. Yeah. And then the physician came in and Chris showed her the message on the phone. And I said,
because I was worried that like, I still at this point didn't think that something as serious as what it proved to be was going on. But what I didn't want to have happen was for them to just write it off as nothing and send us home. I wanted to at least get some kind of definitive answer. So I was like, now, docs, look at this message, that you sent me the other night.
And he's going to show her. And I started on, well, I don't like technology, and I hate using phones, and autocorrect makes me look like an idiot all the time.
And
he holds it up and he says, and she leaves the room for a second, and he goes, Starr, what does this say? And I think it was the first time I looked at it, and I was prepared to be like, I was talking about this, and I looked at it and I went, I don't know what that says. And then I was like, I'm like, I know that I think is vomited, that I think is towel, but I couldn't make out what it said. And then she came back in and he held up the phone, and she looked at it and she goes, honey, I can appreciate autocorrect mistakes. That's not autocorrect.
Do you think that might have been the clincher that made her decide to give you an MRI?
I think that was it, because she immediately went outside and we heard her say, scan. And they had me in there almost immediately.
Well, they told us we would immediately that you would be getting an MRI, but even that was another couple of hours before they finally squeezed you in. Because initially there was only one other person in front of you for an MRI, but then they ended up finding like 3 people that were in more urgent need.
That's right. And then we had to sit in the.
So we were there for a couple of hours.
And I will say this poor resident physician, Dr. Davis, this poor boy. I say boy because he looks like a baby. I know he is late 20s. He is a trained doctor, and he's wonderful. But when I first went in, and I told he asked, why are you here? And I gave him my concern, and I told him about my friend's husband's recent diagnosis, and he said, well, fortunately, that's a rare thing, and you're probably fine. And then he had to deliver me the news about the MR results. And he was coming, and I was like, oh, here comes Dr. Davis. And he came around that corner, and his face was just blank. And I went, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I was like, this is not nothing. And that was the moment that was scary.
Our first reaction, too, was disbelief.
He said that. And you say that I said something different. What I remember saying, he sat down and he said, I hate to have to tell you this. Oh, my heart's going to stop. So like actually putting myself there, but he said, I hate to have to tell you this, but you have a rather sizable tumor on your brain. Yeah. And I looked at him, I said, are you serious? Well, that's what I remember.
What you did say was, are you being sarcastic right now? And even I was like, maybe that's what's going, maybe this is a joke. And I looked at him, and he was like, I would never joke about that.
I would never joke about that. And I immediately said, I'm so sorry. Of course you wouldn't. That was a bad joke I would say to my friend. And then I immediately started apologizing to him. And then I started crying, and it was just, it was, I think that I still held it. It was unreal. It was absolutely unreal.
You really held it together because you needed to then... We immediately got into plans to call the kids to come down and talk to us, and it was your idea right off the bat. You're like, okay, we need to call Grandma Shelley and see if she could take the boys for a while. And
see, I have this ability because, like I said before, I was at a very young age put in charge of my brother and sister, and so I've always had this ability to be like calm, cool, collected, like... Okay, it's got to get done. Somebody's got to maintain. I can freak out later. What do we got to do right this second? And I just went into that mode. Like, okay, I cried for a second, but it wasn't like, no, this is happening. It was more like, I can't believe this is happening. This is unreal. How is this happening? I remember saying that. How is this real?
Yeah.
I said that over and over. How is this even
Still feels
real?
like that to this day.
And I would have a moment where I'd go, how is this real? And then I'd stop and I'd be like, I know it's fine, God. I know it's fine. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. Calm down. And then it was back into it. And that's just kind of how I've been since. I mean, I've had moments where I've just like broken down and got angry, but it doesn't last very long. And ever since that second, I've had a real sense of peace. It sucks, but there's, yeah. So anyway, go back to what you were saying.
Sure. So, and if I miss anything here that you want to talk to, don't hesitate. That was late Monday night. Boys came. Brandon, our oldest, took our 2 youngest after they came and saw us to their grandma's. we were at Good Samaritan from Monday night through Wednesday night.
And it was fine to start, but it got crazy.
Well, so before you talk about that, so what had happened was Good Samaritan is more of kind of like a regional hospital. They're not equipped for things as, frankly, rare and as serious as brain tumors. And so they made a call to the University of Washington, which is one of the top 5 in the country.
Top 4.
For brain
cancer.
tumor and cancer-related issues. But unfortunately, they wanted to get us up there. In fact, they had some initial optimism. Do you mind me sharing? I don't.
No,
so one of the things that made me start to feel a little bit more hopeful was that the people at the UW told the doctors at Good Sam that it at least looked, the MRI looked like it was something called lymphoma, rather than like a glioblastoma.
And they did notice that there was swelling. There was edema.
Edema, right?
Liquid swelling.
In fact, when I looked at the MRI, she didn't want to, but the doctor offered for me to see. The brain tumor was sizable enough, and the swelling in her brain enough that her brain matter was being pushed to the side. So it's in the right side, and her brain matter was being pushed to the left, so much so that the crease between the 2 hemispheres of your brain was more to the left than down the middle where it normally would be. So, but anyway, but the UW people said this looks like lymphoma, which is a more positive prognosis than something like a glioblastoma.
But they immediately,
couldn't get us in.
Because of the edema, they wanted to get me on steroids right away to try to get down the swelling. Just, they said this is clearly, we've caught this early. It's good you came in. It's so good that you came in, but we need to do what we can because we can't do anything for you here. So they got me on anti-seizure medication because they could see that it was being pushed around. And, they got to just do what they can. And so I got put on anti-seizure medication.
Dexedrone or Decadrone or something like that?
Cipro, I think.
No, you're thinking Keppra, which was the anti-seizure medicine.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Oh, but I mean the steroid they had you on
steroid.
was Decadrone or something like that.
Just to do what they could until they could get me, which ended up being
Wednesday night. Or,
I think it was Friday.
No. So we found out Monday night, and we were in that side closet-like thing for a few hours. They eventually got us a room throughout Tuesday, and we slept in that until the very early morning, Tuesday morning.
And then they came in.
And then we were in the hallway.
I mean, the flu, COVID, it was everywhere. The poor nurse, he had to come in and say, I'm so sorry. He woke me up and said, we're going to have to move you guys out of here. And I said, that's fine. I don't mind. And so then we spent 2 days in the hall.
Well, one day. So we were moved out into the hallway early Tuesday morning after we'd slept there.
Next to the EMT entrance.
We were constantly having EMTs come in and out.
It was chaos.
And then it was late that night, Tuesday night, that they finally found a bed. Came and picked you up.
Are you sure? No, no. We slept 2 nights in that hospital.
Yeah. There was Monday night where we spent some time in that closet, and then we were moved to that room. Tuesday night.
Wednesday.
And then Wednesday we were...
Okay.
We never slept in the hallway. We never slept in the hallway.
Oh, it felt like...
It did feel like a long time, that's for sure.
But yeah, I just spent my time praying like a maniac. If I would have to go up to the bathroom, if there was somebody on a bed laying there and smiled at me, I'm sure I'm generally a friendly person, and I'll just stop and talk to anybody about whatever. But if you smiled at me, I was stopping, and I was like, "Hey, I got a brain tumor." Like, I was just talking to everybody. The nurses were fun to get to know, and I mean, just to kill time, like, they would bring people on stretchers, and I would just like stop and pray. Like, I just needed to focus my mind on other things. I had no idea how long I was going to be there. It was just waiting. And so I just used that time to just focus on God, because I was not prepared to like quite take in everything yet, because there's so much that comes along with, oh, you have a tumor in your brain, but we can't really tell you anything much more than that. And that's a lot to take on. That's stressful. So it was just a matter of turning my mind to God. You guys, I'm sure some of you have seen the lives, just trying to keep people updated, but we didn't want to give too much information because we didn't know. We didn't want misinformation and all kinds of stuff just flying around. So it was just like, okay, I'm going to focus on the Lord right now. That's all I can do, which is something, honestly, that I've needed to do for a very long time. So...
Well, in addition to the positive news that it was probably lymphoma, we also got some good news Tuesday during the daytime because they took you to have some CAT scans of the rest of your body. Yeah. And see, it was a couple of years ago that my best friend's wife ended up passing away because of cancer, a brain tumor. But the problem, or one of the problems with her, if I remember correctly, was that her whole body had ended up becoming riddled with cancer. Yeah. So when they came back and they told us that your CAT scans didn't show anything anywhere else in your body,
blessings, miracles. Thank you.
That made us feel a lot
every
better.
time I was waiting for results was probably the hardest. Even still. I loved the doctors. They were all amazing. Every single one was beautiful, and I loved spending every minute I've spent with them so far, and I'm hopeful that it's going to continue down that path. But I will be honest, every single time I saw their faces come down the hall, I would have a little panic attack. Yeah. Because it's scary, because it's like, oh gosh, what are they going to say? What are they going to say?
Yeah. So late Wednesday night, they got you up to the UW, and I met you there. And then Thursday, they gave you a spinal tap, otherwise known as a lumbar puncture, I think LP is the acronym that they kept referring to. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking if there's anything worth talking about that.
They just wanted to see. So they thought it was a pretty good idea of what it was. It was a lymphoma in your brain.
They thought. They weren't sure, though.
Yeah. And so they needed to do the lumbar puncture first because that was going to be the least invasive to get some results. And then after that, if they couldn't find anything, then they were going to do a biopsy.
I think what I recall is that they said the hope is that the lumbar puncture will show conclusively that it's lymphoma, but if it's not conclusive, then the next step would be a biopsy. Yeah. And unfortunately, the results of the lumbar puncture or spinal tap weren't conclusive.
No, but even if it wasn't conclusive, I liked the results. I didn't like the procedure, but the fact that there was nothing there, there was nothing coming from the fluids that was concerning to the point where they were like, hey, this is a serious deal. Again, at this point, we didn't know for sure, but whatever was in her brain was not like spewing cells out to the rest of her body. Yeah, they couldn't even get enough out of the samples that they took to be able to tell what was going on. Yeah, I think what they said is that the density of lymphocyte cells or whatever in the spinal fluid was so sparse that they wouldn't even put it on a smear to look at under a microscope because the chances of seeing one was so incredibly unlikely. What you're like, cool, but now what? And then that is what led to the biopsy, which would have been Friday night, I believe. Yeah. Which, if I can jump back here and bring Philip back into this. So we didn't know. That was a rough day. That was the day I couldn't eat anything all day. I was starving. I was feeling weak. I had all these new sensations were happening. Like my smells were starting to change. Oh, we forgot to mention when you were at Good Sam, you were hearing people speak with accents that weren't normal. Which normally would be awesome, but when you have something growing in your brain and you don't want the heck's going on, it's a little frightening. But that was an experience. But smells were affecting me. It was just rough, and I had this nasty taste in my mouth, and I'm like, I just need something to get this out of my mouth. But I was just waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting for these lumbar results, whatever it's called. And at this time, Philip, way back from the beginning, had decided to come and just pop in and say hi. There were so many people that wanted to come see me, and it was great seeing all these people, and I was so excited to see him. Well, in the time that it took for him to come and meet us at the hospital, they came back and said, we're going to give you, we're going to do an MRI again on you. And I went down, and it was going to be like a 45-minute thing. Here, I was used to the MRIs that were like, oh, it's just 10 minutes. And they're like, no, we're going to do a whole big one. And I thought, oh, what a bummer. Philip's just getting here, and now he's got to wait for me to go do this. And I think I was gone probably at least an hour down there. And then I'd come back and found out I was going to have a biopsy. Right away. Right then. You weren't in that room for more than a couple of minutes with us before they're like, okay, we got to take you. And we're like, okay, we have a minute to pray together. And And so it was scary. That was the scariest part, I think. But the way it worked out, I am so grateful to God and to Philip that he happened to pop by that night, because just the idea that Chris would have been there waiting hours for me by himself with no support. He was probably by this time at his absolute wit's end with stress and grief and trying so hard to just hold it together. And the fact that Philip was the one that was there. And one of the things that Philip and I used to do when he first got his car when we were in high school is we would go to the new cemetery, the cemetery in our town, and we would park and we would just look at the sky and we would talk about sunsets and things like that. And we were in the hospital and they were getting ready to take me down, and Philip made a comment. He said, look at the sky through the blinds. And I looked, and it was just the most beautiful orange purple, especially for like a fall day. It was just beautiful, and I just felt such calm and peace that this person who brought Chris and I together, and here we are at this moment where I didn't know if I was gonna, I mean, they tell you the scariest sides of, they have to, it's respectable, they tell you what could happen, and just thinking like, I could die. I was born at the University of Washington Hospital, and all I kept thinking about, what if this is where I die? What if this is the end? And just having Chris on one side of me on one hand and Philip on the other, and knowing that Philip was going to be there with Chris that night going through this with us, it was one of the most beautiful moments of my life. And I'm so thankful and grateful for that.
We had a good time too. I mean, not to make light of the situation, but
yeah.
we it was good. It was fun catching up. We decided he revealed to me, being the Tom Cruise fanboy that I am, that they're next year, I think it is, they're coming out with the next Mission Impossible, and I flipped out.
Sakes.
So like Philip's going to be coming over, and we're going to do a Mission Impossible rewatch, all the movies, so that we're ready to watch the next one. But no, it was awesome. And in case you're curious, the way the biopsy worked, they told us, is that they basically they positioned her head in a like a vice-like kind of thing that would hold it perfectly still at just the right angle, and then they had a machine, a computer program machine, drill might be a bit of a strong word, but a little tiny hole in the back of her skull, and then they inserted, again, computer program mechanically kind of thing, a device that went in, took a few cells of the a few samples of the tumor. I think
they took 4, didn't they? Isn't that what they said?
3 or 4, yeah. And that was it. And she, was recovered for an hour or so in the recovery room, and then she ended up being brought back down to the room. And then I think it was the next morning that they told us that the initial pathology looked consistent with their expectations of it being lymphoma. And that's when we started to realize, they want to get us out of here. Right?
Yeah. It was like, so you'll be good to go home later. I'm like, excuse me?
Excuse me?
No. What's going on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thankfully, well, not thankfully, but at one point that day, Saturday, you wanted to get up and take a shower, and that didn't go so well, so they kept us over one more night, which is really good. We left Sunday with a veritable pharmacy of drugs. There was the steroids, there was anti-seizure, there was
some aspirin. They had given
narcotics
me.
In case
they gave
you
me narcotics, but I cannot take that stuff. And I'm like, I can take Tylenol. Let me just take the Tylenol. So I haven't touched the other stuff. And
then some other things. But anyway, it was now going to be another waiting game. But now the waiting game would be played at home until we heard from the oncology department. Oncology, for those of you who don't know, is like the study of cancer, and the oncologists were the ones that we were told would be reaching out to us for the next steps.
And it happened quickly. I was told that it could be up to a couple weeks before you hear anything, and so when it was just a couple days later, that was another like, oh no, okay, this is going to be serious.
I didn't tell you, but I was worried so here's what happened. Thanks. So we got home Sunday evening, and then we spent the day together Monday and Tuesday. It was probably on Wednesday, maybe even Tuesday, that they called and... No, I think it was Wednesday, to make the appointment for her to come in and see the oncologist. And that was going to be... what was it? I
think that was supposed to be
Thursday?
Wednesday. No, I think it was... I don't even know.
Well, anyway, real fast. Surprisingly fast. But I remember... The morning of, so this would have been Wednesday or Thursday morning of the appointment, it was following a huge snowstorm. Nobody could drive. We couldn't drive anywhere.
And driving in Seattle in icy snow we live in a place where you think people would know how to do it, but it's a disaster. And I was up all night. I could not sleep. I was up consistently watching news reports on road reports, and I'm like, we're not going to get there. We're not going to get there.
So that morning, I called them and said, hey, is there any way we could have this changed to a Zoom, remote session, or maybe we could just postpone it and reschedule? And that's when she put me on hold, and she talked to the doctor and came back and said, no, it's kind of important, so let's go ahead and do it remotely. And that's what I didn't tell you, because I was worried
that would
maybe
freak me out.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you.
But
thank you.
But it turned out to be fine in the sense that and again, interrupt at any point if you want to say any of this, but we met over Zoom with the doctor, and basically she said that she works at a place called the Alvord Brain Tumor Center at the University of Washington, and at the Brain Tumor Center, they deal with mostly incurable brain tumors. And one of the first things she said was, we don't use the word curable lightly, but you have a lymphoma that we deem curable. And that was a huge positive, a huge relief as well.
She said, we don't get cases like this across our desk. We were very excited to see this.
But with the excitement was also the importance. And so the reason they told me it was really important that we meet that day is because since this is a curable one, they want to take action right away.
Yeah.
And so it was important that we meet with her so that we could plan on her getting admitted to the hospital for a first round of treatment that we'll talk about in a second, which she'll be going to on Monday. So as you guys are watching this air, my wife will be in the hospital
probably
receiving her
puking my guts out. Yay!
Treatment.
Thank you, guys. Pray. Thanks.
So do you want to talk about what the next several months are going to look like?
Well, I'm still kind of foggy on it, so you're more than welcome to jump in. Of course, after the fact, they tell you. From the minute I got into the University of Washington, my nurse that night was like, if you have questions for when your doctors come in, keep them close, because they're going to be in, then they're going to be out, because they're busy. They're doing a lot. I get it. But, when you don't know what questions to ask, it makes it rough. So there are things that I wish I could know for what will be meeting me on Monday, but I'll be figured out. But so from my understanding, I will be every 2 weeks. I'm guessing since it's starting on a Monday, it's just going to be every 2 weeks. Monday mornings, I will be checking into the hospital, and I will be staying there until
for 4 to 7 days.
4 to 7 days. Could be longer though. It depends on how my body responds. And basically, I'll be going there in 2-week blocks, and it will vary about how many days I will actually be there. My hope is that it will be a few days. Reality is, it's not going to be a few days, especially to start out with. And then I will be doing that. So let's say we go in Monday, I start my infusions. I will go through, I don't know how many hours. I don't know where my infusions will be. I know I'll be hooked up to an IV. I don't know if I'll be in a room. I just don't know these things yet. And this is what's killing me right now.
And when she says infusions, what she means is there's a kind of chemotherapy that they're going to be giving her by the name of methotrexate. And the way it works is they pump you up with it, and then they wait for your body, and it's a drug that kills the lymphocytes cells that make up the brain tumor, and they're going to be giving her a big dose of that, and then they're waiting for her body to flush.
A very heavy dose,
a very heavy dose, and then they're going to be waiting for her body to flush it all out. There's a specific percentage per volume or whatever. That
she said there can't be 0.00 anything, and she said that's the hardest. Is going to be the hardest part. Is the waiting. Yeah. If you have the chemical they're using, it is a form of, it's like a chemotherapy,
it is a chemotherapy,
right?
Yeah.
But it's not, hope they don't expect me to lose my hair. I won't be in too much pain. I think as my body starts to get used to it, she said there's going to be some nausea, there might be some bile buildup, things like that.
But she also said that stuff would tend to be only the worst the first and possibly second time as they figure out the right doses.
But once they get that flushed through my system, they need to get it out of my system immediately. And so the long game is going to be waiting for my body to clear. So 1 week or 1-2 week session, it could take me 4 days. The next week session, maybe it takes me 8 days.
Yeah. So if it took 4 days, she would then come back home for the remainder of those 2 weeks.
Yeah.
7 days, 8 days.
But I cannot leave until it is all gone. So even if I take a blood test the day after I get it done, or 2 days after it's flushed, and there's still even a minuscule piece in my blood, I have to do another day of flushing because it will destroy my kidneys.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm not looking forward to, is just waiting and waiting. I'm not somebody who likes to wait. I got a lot going on. I can't just sit around and wait. But God's like, no, you can sit around and wait.
Well, and
We'll figure it out.
it sucks for me, it's way worse for you, I know. But one thing that sucks for me is that I won't be able to be there for most of the time with you because, unfortunately, what I learned is that the Washington State paid medical family leave thing, even though it covers up to like 80% of your salary, that's up to a maximum, and the maximum is like less than half of what I make, and we can't afford to take that. So I'm going back to work on Monday.
Yeah.
But my job is incredibly gracious, and they understand that alternating Mondays, my availability is going to be real spotty because I'll be taking her to the hospital and stuff.
Yeah. So this will go on. I think they said initially they're going to do, they think at least a few months initially. Then they're going to check it. And if it's, when it gets to a point where it's pretty clear and good, they're going to do another couple month flush just to make sure. So this initial round of these treatments, every 2 weeks, it could take 4 months. It could take
so just
6 or 8 months.
My recollection, fallible as it is she said that it's very plausible that after 4 cycles, all the tumor cells could be completely gone, undetected. And if that were to happen, whether that's after 4 cycles or longer, then they would do another 2 or 3 cycles just to make sure it's absolutely gone. So 4 2-week cycles is 2 months. And then that's best case, and then another 2 cycles after that will bring it to 3 months and a half minimum,
and then
up to 6 months or something.
And then however long that takes, the rest of my life, however long that takes, then once it's totally clear and there's no more cancer detected and no more tumor, then starts a round of chemotherapy. And I think they said that final stint will be 3 to 4 months.
Well, so
or 3 to 4. Not more.
There would be some chemotherapy again at the beginning of that 3 week, but actually what that 3 weeks thing for is the stem cell transplant,
which I don't know hardly. I don't know nothing about it, but I've not been hearing good things. I've heard, anytime I say that, people go, "Ooh, that's going to be the hard part." I'm like, "Wait, what do you know that I don't know?" I'm not Googling. I'm not trying to learn anything, but it is scary, and I don't mind so much. It has to happen. I can't be sad about it. It's going to be tough. Some days are going to be harder than others, but you just have to maintain busyness. I've got a plan. I'm sure that will change.
Don't be too busy. Get some rest as well.
Well, of course, but I have to be busy all the time. I have to have something occupy my time.
We're very similar.
I'm going to be just sitting in a room by myself for hours and hours and hours and hours of my day, which, I won't be by myself. I'll be with the good Lord. But it's a lot of time that I'm going to be wondering what's happening here. But I know that some weeks are going to be better. Some 2-week cycles will be better. And I'll be home more than another week, Maybe this week I'll get to spend 4 days at home. Maybe the next week I'll get to spend 2 days at home. But I will be coming back and forth when I can. It's the 3 to 4 weeks of doing stem cell therapy and chemo where I can't leave. That is what I'm really not. I'm trying not to look that far ahead. You go day by day, 10 seconds, 10 minutes. That's how I try to live. If I can get through this 10 seconds, I do another 10 seconds. But then it's 10 minutes. But one thing I will say real quick, one thing I'm worried about is Logan, our 17-year-old, is graduating this year. Yeah. And if I don't get to see my baby boy walking down at graduation, we gonna have some words with some doctors, and obviously not. I'm not gonna mess up my treatment, but that would just break my.
We'll cross that.
I know. That's why I'm trying not to think about it, but realistically, I've been thinking about this, and this is. Time goes like this, but it's gonna be summer again before I know it, and like how much of my year is gonna be just sitting around. It's tough. My kids are growing,
but the great, beautiful, wonderful thing is that after all of that arduousness, all of that time in the hospital, the what may be discomfort, especially during those 3 or 4 weeks, and at the end result, Lord willing, and by all indications, will be that you will have been cured, and that's a big deal.
That is a huge deal.
Now
that's not something that my friend's husband is not going to get. Yeah. And it breaks my heart to think that their outcome is going to be so different than what mine is. And why do I get to, it's hard to think about that guilt. Like I've when like when you're looking for a new car and you're like, oh, I think I want a new Jeep. And then everywhere you look, you see Jeeps, and that's all that's in front of your face. I've seen so many cancer and sickness diagnoses the past 2 weeks. And they're all so different. And it's like, this is happening to us all the time. We live in our own bubble and we don't pay attention to it. And,
it's funny you say that, because that was similar to what I experienced when I started riding a motorcycle several years ago. Is prior to that point, I didn't realize how many of them were out there on the road. But once you start riding, you're like, holy crap, they're everywhere.
We're so old. You say several years ago. That was like...
It was like 10 years ago, wasn't it?
No, babe. That was when
Logan... Oh, you're right. It would have been more like
15 years ago. 15 years ago.
For like a year and a half.
Yeah.
Anyway. Well, so that pretty much brings us to now. How are you feeling at the moment? Like, not just in terms of like emotions and optimism and stuff, but also like, how, are you feeling at all more yourself than you were there for a while? Or
I like knowing what's going on. I like knowing that there is a plan. It makes me feel comforted knowing like there's going to be an end. It's just going to be a while. It's irritating. I don't like pain. I don't like, I'm kind of a weenie when it comes to things like that. But pain is temporary. It's just something I have to deal with.
And you're not entirely yourself yet. I know that you still, things aren't quite familiar
but
yet.
I do feel like I'm not having as disgusted like smells and grossness anymore. It has been very nice to be able to recognize that these things, I'm not losing my mind. Something's happening, but I can recognize that I can't make these connections, and there's a reason, which has been reassuring. Today was frustrating. I had there's a lot when they say, hey, you're going in to live in the hospital and we have to be here in 2 days. And we were gone. I haven't really been home or in any sense of normalcy for months, and everything's just kind of chaos. And so having to set all this stuff up, it's been exhausting. I have to prepare to go stay at a hospital for an undetermined amount of time at this point, And so it's been really stressful. So it's been a long couple days trying to prep as much as possible. And today was a big day. So today I am exhausted. But I wanted to get this video done still. Chris gave me the option to wait until we got back. But my morbid brain was like, what if this is my last chance? What if it doesn't go right? And I don't want this to be my final video diary. Which I know it's not going to. It's just my anxiety. But I just wanted to get it done with because I don't know how I'm going to feel in a couple weeks. And I don't know if I'm going to want to do this again. I've enjoyed sharing this with people because, I've already had so many people tell me, thank you for being so open. I've had something that's been bothering me, but I've been scared to look into it.
Yeah.
And you can't be scared to look into it. One thing I'm so proud of, Logan, our son, he came to us about his appendix problems and he said, my stomach really hurts. And being a mom, sorry, Logan, my thing is, did you poop yet today? What did you do? And so I just thought it was like, I'm like, you're probably fine. But he's like, no, something's wrong. And he pushed and
I was angry that I had to take him to the
it's
care.
frustrating.
I thought he was being dramatic.
Yeah. And then I've told him, I'm so proud of you for speaking up and recognizing something was wrong and being aware of yourself and saying, I really want to get this looked at because he had surgery that night. So I'm so proud of him for having, I think we've done good with our kids and given them their own mind and everything and giving him like the ability to say, please, there's something's wrong, mm-hmm. and believing him, and not just pushing it off thinking that he doesn't want to go to work or something, So yeah, don't wait. I think, I'm not sure if you said it in a video or something, but I just keep thinking about it. If something's wrong, you feel, hey, I should get looked at. and you really don't want to go, and you're like, oh, what are you going to be at? $150 copay and a couple hours in the urgent care.
Big flipping deal.
Big deal. Or they could say, oh, you have a cancerous brain tumor. You have to be in surgery here, or you have to start getting treatments within 2 weeks. I mean, you don't know. So don't wait.
Err on the side of caution.
Always. And that's what I'm going to do from now on. Like, don't push it off. Your body is important, you know. I feel, I don't, you know, you talk when you get older, like, oh, I'm so old. And you always think, I'll worry about it later. I'll worry about it later. Later? We're in later, you know. Time goes fast. You don't realize it when you're younger, but you always think, well, down the road. I'll lose weight down the road. I don't have to worry about that now. Like, oh, I shouldn't have this extra soda for dinner tonight. Oh, I just won't have one tomorrow. But you always do, you know. So just be more aware. That's what I'm trying to take from this. That's what people have been saying to me. Like, thank you for speaking up. Thank you for sharing. And so as long as I feel comfortable, I will keep sharing. I typically am a very private person. I don't know if you want to get into this part yet, but or however you want to do it. But I just want to make sure I get this out there. I am a rather private person. I will talk to anybody in the grocery store. My grandma always taught me, like, be friendly with everybody. It doesn't matter what kind of day you're having. It doesn't take much to smile and just say hi. So I always talk to everybody. Even if I'm having the worst day, I've always got a smile on my face because I'm not going to let my bad mood destroy somebody else's day. We were telling the girl at Target today, I said, if somebody honks at me, that's all I can think about for the rest of the day. What did I do? Why did you honk at me? Why don't you like me? I'm a good person. I didn't do anything to you. And I don't want to do that to somebody else. I forgot where I was going with this.
I think you might be gearing up to say, I need space, probably.
No, not at all. But generally, I'm a very private person. That's one thing that you know, during what I like to call the plague times of the past couple years, I kind of retreat. I think most of us did really retreat into our own little holes. And I ended up pushing myself away from family and friends. And it kind of got turned around where I was seeing that people didn't want to talk to me. You know, I've always been very involved in tight, close friend groups. And I've felt like I've built these great friendships. And I've led a lot of different groups over our times in different churches. And I always felt like I really opened up. But I realized I don't open up as much as I think I do. I'm always the one who sits and listens to other people. And it kind of started hitting me right before we came into lockdown and everything. I would be in a women's group with women for 3 years, go out and have drinks and hang out and share our lives. I wasn't sharing my life with them. And I would make a joke in a group, and somebody that I would know for 3 years would go, "You're really funny." I'm like, do you not listen to me when I'm leading and talking? Like, are you not hearing what I'm saying? I am funny. I'm fun. Why don't you know this about me? And it started hurting my feelings, if I'm being honest. And I'm not trying to call anybody out, any of my friends. I adore and cherish everybody that's ever been in my life, good times and bad. But I started realizing these people, I didn't realize, I convinced myself, why don't they care enough about me to ask me questions? I'm always asking everybody else questions. And so I got into a really bitter place where I was just going to stop sharing. Social media is fake. These people don't care. Everybody's just putting fake pictures up. It doesn't matter anymore. I've got my couple close friends and that's good. And so it's been a hard 2-3 years, past couple years, and I felt very distanced. So I've just locked everything off and I haven't shared. So being able to open up again and share and meet new people and everything, it's been a beautiful blessing. And to see all these people, all of this experience has been bringing all these family members that I haven't talked to in years back together, like broken family members that have, you know, for one reason or another, through deaths and all kinds of things, just have splintered. Friends that I haven't talked to in years that have always been there, but I don't take the time to reach out. Now, to be fair, they're not taking the time to reach out to me, but now this is an opportunity for all of us to reconnect. And I'm seeing these just beautiful golden threads that God has just been stitching throughout my life, and they're all starting to pull together in ways again, that you don't pay attention to. You go through these tragedies and you just get so caught up in your own experience. But now I can see, why were you my friend this whole time? I see now. I see why we're here. And it seems like you're never going to see these people and you're never going to hear from them and they're gone. And sometimes that happens, you know. Friends don't always have to be in your life forever. That's something I learned a while ago and I was okay with that. But that doesn't mean that they have to be gone always. God puts people in your life for reasons. And I'm so thankful that, you know, I talked to my sister last night, my brother-in-law, and I said, you know, my brother-in-law's having a hard time with this, you know, with wrapping his head around this idea that this is happening to me. But I told him, I said, I am okay going through this because it's a blink of an eye. It seems it's going to be a long month. It's going to be fine. But I can already feel so much power and love in me the past 2 weeks that I've been missing. That's been the whole time. It's always been there. I just wasn't able to recognize it because I was so stuck in my own self. I feel like I'm rambling. But if the amazing blessings and the people, the healing, and not just directly to me, other conversations that people have brought to me of connections through what's happening with us, if that brings any sense of beauty and peace and renewal, that's fine. I can take this for that much time. If it brings, you know, if we're being honest, our older boys have kind of over the years, because again, you turn into teenagers and you get your own brains and you don't, you know, you want to experience the world, and I respect and appreciate my kids. But if this can bring my kids, my boys prayed over me in the hospital that night. They left me in the hospital the first night, and they have not ever prayed with me. I don't think I've ever heard them do that. I mean, one didn't really say much out loud, but it was so beautiful. And my son, I'm not going to share the prayer that he gave because it was private, but it was funny and it was exactly what I needed to hear, and it was beautiful. And I mean, that is why God brought me to this. That's what he's been building me for, to get to this point. And I see nothing but, I mean, there's going to be struggles, but I will take that because pain does not last forever. I'm going to be here. I'm not going anywhere. Knock on wood. I don't plan on it. It's going to be hard on my kids. We've been very open with the boys, what's happening. I've given them free rein to share any emotions. I don't want them to hide anything from me and think they're going to hurt my feelings. Like if they're irritated that I'm not here as much, I said, let me know. I've given them free rein to share with their friends what's going on with them. I don't want them to hide this. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's nothing to be scary. It's just something that we're going to deal with as a family. And the main point is that in the end, God will get us through. We're going to have each other. It's going to be hard, but it's going to be over and it will be fine. And I just see and feel so much love and spirit in all of it. And it's going to suck at times. I'm going to have moments where I'm going to cry because I'm a crier, but it will be fine. It'll be okay. Did I get enough of that? Oh, all that to say that I have become a very reclusive private person. So doing this is a very, putting myself out there is a big deal. And I realized that, I mean, I don't know how many of my actual people that I know in my life are watching this, if anybody still is. But I assume some of you are Chris's followers, and don't know who I am at all. And I don't really accept a lot of friend requests, and I'm a goofy, I have a dark sense of humor. I joke around about a lot of weird things. I have a sailor mouth most of the time that I try my best to keep in check, but my filter is going a little off the walls lately. But one thing that I was worried about being involved in like church groups and stuff and meeting people through church and friending people on Facebook and Instagram is I don't want to offend people. And I've seen a lot of comments in Chris's, responses and conversations to things that he posts. And it's very hurtful sometimes to see judgments from people who are maybe a little bit cleaner in their way of thinking or the way they portray themselves. And I'm just, very worried that I'm going to offend somebody. So if I have a weird, twisted, dark sense of humor, and so I just don't want anybody to be like, oh my gosh, look at this Christian woman, and why could she laugh at something like that? And also, I mean, I'm up for conversations. I'm not as, learned as this gorgeous, lovely man next to me. But, you know, I will talk when I can. But one thing I've noticed, because I have kind of kept myself from commenting too much, I'm usually just a liker and a lover and a care, you know, emoji giver. But I've noticed in the past week, if somebody posts something, even if it's like a funny or a joke, and I leave like a funny gif or something, they immediately respond and say, "Oh, Starr, I just want to let you know my heart is with you." Okay, I thank you so much. I appreciate every kind word, but I'm still me. I'm still here. I'm going to be goofy and silly and funny. So if you see me posting and commenting on stuff, I'm just responding. I'm excited to meet new people and get to know new lives. And if I'm like leaving something funny, you don't need to be like, "Oh my gosh, how are you doing? Are you okay?" I appreciate it. I really do. And you can interact with me however you want. If that's just who you are and that's what you do, that's fine. But don't feel that I need to be coddled this whole time. I'm just here. I'm just getting through. I'm just living my life in a different place. So, and I hope I don't offend anybody with any of my sick humor and weirdo posts and stuff.
And if she does, too bad. So let's then start to wrap this up. You know, on the you tied in there toward the end some of the things I wanted to get to, like the purpose in it all, or at least what could be the purpose. And
yeah.
So maybe we'll just wrap things up with what I like to do with a lot of guests, which is to ask them to offer something of a parting message.
Oh,
the
gosh.
way I often put it is like this. You know, we've been talking for about 2 hours now, and anybody that's stuck around for the whole thing, thank you. It means a lot to me.
Maybe a
and
two-parter.
probably to Starr as well. But when, especially with long episodes like this, I often say, you know, a lot of the stuff we've talked about, people won't remember after they turn the recording off. So if you could leave our viewers with one thing to take away that they will remember on the topic of Christ or Calvinism or cancer or all three, what would that be?
I guess that, I mean, you're not going to be able to change the outcome of things. So there's no sense in living in misery. Misery breeds misery. I've had times of depression. This might be longer, sorry. I've had times of dark depression that I've gotten myself into. And I just talked myself into just being sad all the time. But I feel like I can recognize when I start to spiral down into dark places. And I don't want to be there. And I have a hard time being around people who constantly live that kind of lifestyle, because I hate to use the word empathetic or empathic, because I feel like that term has kind of gotten overused lately. But I am a very empathic person, and I take on emotions of those around me because I'm constantly trying to make sure everybody else is okay. This is going to be a long twist around, babe. Get ready.
It's all right. It's okay.
So I think I've gotten pretty good about not dwelling in sadness. You have to try to stay positive in all circumstances, because what are you going to do? There's nothing you can do except just walk through the walk and just deal with it as it comes. You can sit and scream and cry, but all that's going to do is cause more stress and more anxiety, and it's not going to be productive, and you're just wasting your time. So one thing, my sister and I were talking about this last night, like, pain is temporary. And I've always thought, I think I mentioned this earlier, if you can get through 10 seconds of this, guess what? You can get through another 10 seconds. And those 10 seconds can turn into 10 minutes, but it's not going to be forever. And you're not alone. I know it feels like you are. It feels like you're the one experiencing it and no one knows what it's like, but you're not alone. And so that's kind of the way we're going to do this, just bit by bit, and then we're going to get to the end, and it's going to be done, and then we move on to the next stage of life that's already planned for us. It's going to be exciting when we get to the other end of this and see, you know, not death. I mean, that'll be fine too. But when we get to the other end of this journey that we're about to embark on, I'm excited to see what's waiting for me, because I know that the perseverance and the struggle and going through it is just more threads that are being brought together, more people, more love, more joy. And so it's really exciting to, you know, as much as it's going to suck, as long as it's going to feel like it's going to be over. Like I said before, it feels like I put my Christmas decorations away last year and now I got to try to get them out, which probably won't happen if we're being honest this year. But time goes so fast, and everything that is before you is an experience and a journey and a lesson and all that cliche stuff that, you don't want to hear, but it's true. There is a purpose in the struggle, and I hate to say there are people that have it worse, but it's true. And everybody has right to their emotions and to live their experience however they want. But I just have to, for myself, I can't live in the darkness because I can't see purpose as well. I can't recognize those gifts from God. I can't recognize all of the blessings if I'm just focused on my own pain and misery. But if I can turn that misery and my own sadness into trying to maybe help somebody else through it and encourage them and get them to that place of, we're going to be okay together, like I'll stand here with you, then that can, I'm losing it.
Well, I think that's good. Well, I very much appreciated you taking this time.
Oh, goodness.
I really do. I think you did a great job. And now you, my viewers, know a little bit more about me and my family and my best half, as she likes to put it. I'll probably be stepping back from weekly streaming for a few months so that I can do a little bit more double duty while Starr's in the hospital. But I like this way of kicking off the hiatus, giving people a chance to get to know us and get to know you, and they'll be praying for you. Is it okay if I encourage them to reach out if they want to be added to that group on Facebook?
Oh, of course,
where
yeah.
you'll be
We've got a Facebook group that anybody wants to follow along. I'm loving seeing the prayers. I'm a worldly woman, and I love hearing like, oh, my church in such and such, and we're praying for you, and it just, when you see people put out like, oh, prayer requests, and you always go, oh, y'all be praying for you, like, oh no, people are actually praying, because I am feeling so much love and support, and it's just been beautiful.
So if you want to keep up to date, find me on Facebook and ask me to be invited to the group, and I'll send you an invite. And she'll be doing periodic Facebook lives probably, and we'll be posting updates there.
I'll need people to talk to. So. I will say though, there is one concern I have, because I am a very rather private person, and this is going to be kind of a weird time. I have had a few people reach out and say, I would love to come and meet you, and that is beautiful, and I appreciate that so much. I would love to meet people, but that could be something that could be developed. I'm not really
right now it's a little bit intense for that.
I'm not excited about the idea of just random people that I've never met. But if you want to start conversations with me, I'm responding as I can, but I still can barely hold my phone. And so I'm doing my best to keep up with messages, or just like thank yous, and which are all genuine. Once I get to them, that's a genuine like thank you so much. A total stranger reaching out to me, that's crazy. But as far as like coming to see me, we would for a while at least try to keep that. I mean, some of you do know Chris personally in real life, and if you want to come down with him and see me, that's fine. But he needs to be with me, because I don't want to be meeting strangers. It's a little scary.
Yeah. So. All right, well, I guess that's it. Again, thank you, babe. I really appreciate it, and I love you dearly. And I wouldn't want to go through this with anybody.
I couldn't go through it with anybody else. Chris has been trying to get him to like take breaks for himself and get him to just have a few minutes is just because you're gonna need it. So if we could, this is another thing, if I may mention, there are a lot of people out there who are very mean to Chris. And it is because I am a sassy gal. I very, very much need to hold my tongue. That is one of the hardest things I have to do. Reading through some of the comments that he gets from people makes me so angry, and seeing the way he is treated. And this is the most graceful, loving man, and he has his moments. I won't clap back at people in comments, but I do say to him, hey, maybe you shouldn't have said that way. But it is very hard for me to listen to people speak to my husband the way some of you guys out there do. And it breaks my heart, not just as his wife and the man that I care so much about, but the fact that we are supposed to be brothers and sisters in Christ. And I'm sorry, but I don't think that Jesus talked to his family that way. And I know Jesus would not talk to you that way. So if we could just a little more kindness in general, that would make this go a lot easier.
Well, there you go. There you have it. You heard it. What's the phrase? You heard it here. So, all right. Well, we're going to sign off and enjoy the rest of our night. And in 2 days, Monday, the day that you guys are watching this, she'll be in the hospital. So maybe throw up an extra prayer for her. But
thank you very much. Sorry, that was my mama. My mama attitude. My mama bear coming out a little bit. So.
That's okay. All right. Well, take care, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Well, I hope you enjoyed watching the interview as much as my wife and I enjoyed recording it. As I said there toward the end of the interview, I will be stepping back from weekly streaming for a few months to make sure that I'm able to pull both duties, both the breadwinner duties and the homemaker duties. So don't expect any episodes of either Theopologetics or Rethinking Hell Live for some time. However, I do want to say that I'm tentatively planning on January 2nd to launch a new YouTube channel that will be very easy for me to put out content. Won't take much time at all. I'm planning on calling it What Do You Say? Bite-sized lessons in English expression. And the idea is to have roughly 1 minute episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday where I cover various grammar pet peeves and mispronunciations and misused expressions and things like that. So it won't have anything to do with apologetics or theology or Bible, but it'll be something I can throw together real easily and get a whole bunch of videos queued up without much effort. And it's something I'm interested in and excited to embark upon as well. So be on the lookout for that. I'll post it all on my social media and website, chrisdate.info and stuff like that once it starts. And I'll be very interested to hear what you think. But anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. I know it was a long interview, but it was really touching for me to be able to record it and then to weave in all those photos from our childhood and stuff. It was really cool, and I hope that it touched you as well. So with that being said, I'll bid you adieu and see you again in a few months. Bye-bye. I've been your host, Chris Date, and thanks so much for watching Theopologetics, where we think together through what we believe, why we believe it, and not something else. If you've enjoyed this episode, please click the thumbs up, like icon, the subscribe button, and the bell icon to receive notifications when new videos are streamed or uploaded. Either way, come back in 2 weeks for the next episode of Theopologetics, streaming live on YouTube every other Monday at 6 p.m. Pacific. Until then...